All right. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do. It contains important information about our process tonight. Next on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from August 10th, 2021. Does anyone have any corrections to note?
Chair, you're muted.
That was intentional. So I'm seeing no corrections requested or hands raised. Milk, please. I'll entertain a motion then to approve the notes as presented.
Why is it?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the notes as presented.
All right,
I second the motion.
it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay, seeing everybody raising hand in approval. Thank you.
Chair Roosevelt, before we move on, may I just ask city staff that that when they do the notes, can they highlight the commissioners' names like they've done in the past? These notes did not have that highlighting.
Like
They didn't have them in bold. They're in bold.
Yeah.
No, because on the version I saw, I thought they were. Okay, I will make a note. I'll check.
At least I download from the city website because I don't want 500 pieces of paper, my tax dollars being printed 500 pieces of paper. So I download from the city website, and at least the notes on the city website, they are not in bold.
Okay, noted. I'll make sure that's fixed.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on then. Informational items. Do we have any informational items to begin with?
Yes, if I can add something. I just wanted to let you all know that next week on October 19th at City Council, they're going to be discussing the Oak Lodge governance options. So if that's something that you all are interested in tuning into, there'll be a report that was done, and there'll be a presentation and discussion with the City Council. And that's all I've got.
Awesome, thank you very much. Okay, this is an opportunity for our audience to participate, and I see that we have a number of those in the audience this evening. So this, to be clear, this is an opportunity for audience to participate relevant to anything not on tonight's agenda. So if anyone attending this evening would like to talk about something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. Please use the raise your hand function in Zoom, and we'll be looking for that now. Otherwise, if you're here for something on the agenda, to sit tight, we'll be there soon. So looking to you, Vera, do you see anybody raising hand?
I do not, no.
Okay. So I am going to move on then to the first item on our first hearing this evening, rather, is the Hillside Park Plan Development. The public hearing on the Hillside Park Plan Development is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to consider application number PD 2021-001. The purpose of this application is to request approval for the various applications associated with a plan development at 2889 Southeast Hillside Court. The applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the City of Milwaukee's zoning subdivision ordinance, comprehensive plan, any applicable municipal code provisions, and the proposal conforms with all cities' applicable criteria. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to the council regarding whether the proposal conforms with all of the city's applicable criteria. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance.
Milwaukie Municipal Code 19.302, medium and high density residential zones. Section 19.303, commercial mixed use zones. Section 19.311, planned development zone. Section 19.505.3, multifamily housing. Section 19.600, off-street parking and loading. Section 19.700, public facility improvements. Section 19.902, amendments to maps and ordinances. Section 19.1007, type 4 review. Title 17, land division, specifically a subdivision. And section 12.16, access management.
Thank you, Vera. Okay, conduct of our hearing tonight. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and the relevant criteria, and to avoid any repetition and non-relevant information rather. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the commission may, if requested, allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Any such continuance or extensions shall be subject to the limitations of the 120-day rule unless the continuance or extension is requested or agreed to by the applicant. Tonight, we will be limiting time of comments to 3 minutes. I'll be asking my co-chair, Commissioner Edge, to keep time for us, and he will give us a warning. Commissioner Edge, if you want to give a warning at 1 minute and 30 seconds, that would be great. At 1 minute and again at 30 seconds, that would be great. And we will keep you at 3 minutes per comment this evening. So we're going to move in then to conflicts of interest. Sorry about that. Do any members of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Please raise your hands. Seeing none raised, does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? Please raise your hand. Seeing none. Please, a question as to whether does any member of the Planning Commission wish to report an ex parte contact? One hand raised. Commissioner Hemer.
Yeah, so I attended the Ardenwald NDA meeting where they discussed this, and really their conversation was more about how the relocation of the people and what's going to happen when everything starts going, and that's what the majority of the discussion was about.
Okay, I appreciate that, and because of that, we're going to go into the next piece on this, Greg, which is
Chair Losfeld, Commissioner Ert.
Was there another hand?
Yeah, sorry.
Commissioner Ert?
Just kind of the same thing. I haven't written out, but for a lot of these kind of projects that are discussed a lot in the public, it is likely that I have seen comments it's a large 8,000 member community group that discusses a lot of things around the city. So it is likely that I've seen comments, read comments, potentially responded to comments on the general kind of conversation, maybe adjacent to this project or to this project. I don't recall anything that would affect my ability to kind of be impartial or go by the code on this, but it's community, and we may have discussed this, maybe not, but it's likely that at some point conversation came up.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now to both of you then, does anyone have a rebuttal to the ex parte contacts declared by commissioners? I'm assuming, Vera, we no indication of those who'd like to challenge our two commissioners.
No.
Okay, and move on. Oh, was that a no?
No.
Okay, great. Will any commissioner who has visited the site prior to this hearing, please raise your hand now? Looking as though all of us have. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Did any of those commissioners who have visited the site speak to anyone at the site or know anything that is indicated any different than what is reported in the staff report? If so, raise your hand. Okay, looking to be consistent then. And finally then, does any member of the audience wish to challenge the participation of any member of the Planning Commission this evening? Vera, just look to you. Use your raise the hand function if you would like to do so.
I don't see any hands raised, Commissioner.
All right. Jurisdictional issues. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter?
I see none.
Excellent. Then let's move on. Staff report, please.
Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right. And all right, hopefully everyone can see a PowerPoint presentation. Great.
Yes, looking good.
Terrific. Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Vera Collier, Senior Planner, here to present the staff report for the Hillside Final Plan Development. This application should look familiar to you. This is a brief summary of the review process for the final plan development before I get into the details of the application. The preliminary plan development was approved by the Planning Commission on March 23rd of this year. And in a final plan development review, when it follows a preliminary, the code is very clear. If the proposal is consistent with the previous approval, then the commission shall recommend approval to the City Council. City Council review has been tentatively scheduled for November 16th. And I do just want to summarize the project here over the next couple of slides. The subject property is located at 2889 Southeast Hillside Court. The lot or the parcel, the property in question is outlined here in red. The neighborhood is predominantly single dwelling units to the north. The campus of Providence Hospital is to the east. The vacant Murphy site, as we call this, to the south. And the North Milwaukie Industrial Area, Southern Pacific Rail Line, and Highway 224 are immediately to the west. The site is located in the Ardenwald neighborhood and is adjacent to central Milwaukie part of the city. The proposal, the applicant is seeking land use approval to develop a mixed income community of 600 units, which would be 400 new units, 100 replacement units, and then the 100 units in the Hillside Manor Tower, which will remain as part of the project at the end of all phases of the development. The applicant is using the planned development process, which allows greater flexibility in design than would otherwise be possible through the standards of the underlying R3 zone. As described in the application materials that were shared with everyone as part of the staff report, the existing houses in Hillside Park will be replaced with 100 new affordable units for the population currently being served on the site. Removing the existing houses creates the opportunity to develop 400 new units, which will provide a variety of housing choice from walk-up townhomes in the northern part of the site, which is adjacent to the existing single-family neighborhood to the north, and 3- and 4-story mixed-income apartment buildings to the south. In addition to the residential development, the proposal includes opportunities for small-scale commercial and office uses, as indicated on the map in the hatched purple area. And those commercial and office uses would be on the ground floor along 32nd Avenue. The GMU zone, the general mixed use zone, allows for a wide variety of uses, many of which are not appropriate for or compatible with this development. So there is a sort of a special selection of commercial uses that would go with this plan development proposal. The master plan also includes subdividing the property into smaller lots that you can see here. So there would be blocks that allows for the project to be phased and provides opportunity for development of lots by outside partners with the housing authority. This is the phasing plan that is proposed. It will involve phased demolition of existing improvements, including removal of the structures, demolition of the existing roads, and removal or abandonment of the underground infrastructure. A new street grid and infrastructure plan is proposed and was made part of the plan set that was submitted, with the streets to be realigned in a more north-south fashion. Phasing plan includes assisting the current Hillside Park residents with relocation to one of the new units upon completion. And the first phase anticipates that the Housing Authority would be developing at least 100 replacement units that would be leased to low-income residents. So you can see phase 1 is in the southern portion, and then phase 2 is the northern portion of the development, and the Hillside Manor is the existing tower, and that would remain. As part of the application materials, this is a detail of the phasing plan. So you can see that, as part of phase 1, when that is all under construction, phase 2, or the northern portion of the site, remains in place with all utilities and road connections and so on. That all remains in place so that folks can continue to live in those units while phase 1 is under construction. In order to reach the density goals and allow for mixed-use development as part of the project, the final development plan and program includes a request to change the zoning and comprehensive plan designation of the property. Northern portion of the site is proposed with a zoning of R1 and a comprehensive plan designation of high-density residential. And the southern section of the site is proposed to have a general mixed-use or GMU zone with a comprehensive plan designation of town center, consistent with the property directly to the south across Meek Street. So the 600 unit community, dwelling unit community is again going through this plan development process. This chart sort of summarizes what is being proposed as part of the plan development. So as far as the existing, the preliminary plan development was approved in March, and so now the proposals for the final plan development. As part of the subdivision application, there are 2 lots as part of the property now. The proposal is 10 lots. There's a zone change application. So right now the property is zoned R3. The proposal is to have R1 to the north and GMU to the south. And again, there's a comprehensive plan land use map change that's proposed. The existing comprehensive plan land use designation for the property is medium density. The proposal is to have high density to the north to accompany the R1 zone, and town center to the south to accompany the GMU zone. As part of the plan development, these are some of the key aspects of the project. There's a blended density on the site with an overall density of 41 dwelling units per acre. 41% of the site is in open space, 29% tree canopy. They are proposing green building construction consistent with the requirements for the funding structure that will be helping to pay for the development. And again, it is proposed to be a mixed income community with units affordable to families at 30% to 80% of the area median income. Part of the proposal is to modify some of the development standards. They are proposing to make some changes as far as the minimum setback to be 5 feet in the R1 zone, except where it's adjacent to the R7 zone to the north, where they would be consistent with the required minimum setbacks. They're asking to use metal panels and fiber cement siding as primary materials for some of the buildings. They are overall asking for a reduced parking proportion on the site to be 0.82 spaces per unit, and that includes on-street parking spaces. As part of their application materials, they did submit details about their transportation demand management program, and they are proposing 375 bike parking spaces throughout the site and within some of the buildings for their overall bicycle parking section as well. Some of the changes that were made from the approved preliminary plan development to the final plan development, and the applicant can go into a bit more detail about this. But as far as what was submitted as part of the application, they did submit a summary of changes from that preliminary approval, and those were included in attachment 3A with the staff report. All of the changes were made to the narrative that was submitted, not to the plans, the transportation impact statement, or the preliminary stormwater report. The majority of changes are updates to the preliminary PD narrative that you read back in March. And they included some new sections related to the zoning and comprehensive plan map amendments, as well as a proposed subdivision, because those were not components of the preliminary plan review. The 32nd Avenue frontage has been redesigned based on input from TriMet, as recommended during the hearing on the preliminary, on the location of the bus stops and other transit facilities along the frontage of 32nd Avenue. The applicant removed the reference to a new bike lane on 32nd Ave. It was erroneously included in the preliminary plan development report. The phasing plan has been changed to include Lot C in phase 1. So you might remember that in the preliminary plan, it was actually a 3-phase project. It's now a 2-phase. So that southern section, it's now all phase 1, as opposed to being phase 1 and phase 2. They included information describing the architectural character of the buildings, and they included additional information related to the Central Milwaukie Bikeways concept plan, because that was now more fully fleshed out, and they could include some more information regarding the relationship of this project to that Bikeways concept plan. All right, so the approval criteria for a final plan development is pretty straightforward, actually. If the final development plan and program is found to be consistent with the previous approval and with the requirements of this section of 19.311, the Planning Commission shall recommend approval together with any appropriate documents and conditions to the City Council for adoption. So that is what is before the Planning Commission tonight for review of the final plan development. Staff received 2 comments as part of the proposal from ODOT, which were reflected in the conditions of approval and were shared with the applicant and with our engineering department. And we received a letter in support of the project from Sharon Johnson, but those are the only 2 comments that were received regarding the project. Staff's recommendation to the commission is to recommend to City Council approval of the final development plan, subject to the findings, conditions of approval, and other requirements that were included in the staff report. The final development plan and program is consistent with the previous approval and with the intent and requirements of the plan development section of the code. You do have some decision-making options. You can recommend approval of the application as staff has recommended. You could recommend approval with modifications to the findings or the conditions of approval. We would just need to read those into the record tonight. You could continue the hearing and advise the applicant of any additional information that is needed to ensure that it is in fact consistent with the previous approval from March. The 120-day deadline for the application is Christmas, as December 25th. And again, we've tentatively scheduled the hearing with the City Council to be on November 16th. That concludes the presentation. Again, the applicant and their team is here as well, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to stop sharing my screen though, so you can stop looking at the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Vera. Commissioners, looking to you to see if you have any questions for staff relevant to the presentation. Commissioner Hemer, go ahead.
When they do the PD, I just noticed that all the residential lots do not have driveways, right, which is required by code. So are they, with that PD, are they just trying to change that code to make it all on-street parking or off-site parking?
Well, there are parking lots as part of the multifamily developments. There is some on-street parking, certainly. There is off-street parking, and then there are the townhomes as well in the northern section. So what we just don't see from the plans are sort of the specific site plans for all of the driveways, but the majority of the buildings are multifamily. So there are the off-street parking spaces, and in combination with some of the on-street spaces as well. So, but when you mean the driveways, do you mean to the,
To the town,
townhome?
to the,
To the
yeah, I'm sorry, that's what I meant by that.
yeah, and I think.
Single family dwellings, I guess.
Right, to the attached single family. And so I think, yeah, it looks like we've got we have off-street spaces as part of the townhomes as well. There are some parking areas as I'm looking at the plans. So we would need to look at those when that phase comes in to make sure that it's consistent with our requirements for townhomes at that time. Yeah.
Okay, so they'll be back a second time with phase 2 when all that, or when they turn in their plans to do it.
When the buildings come in. Yep. So they'll need to comply with the code at that point. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Sherman, you're up.
Thanks so much, Vera. I was looking at the ODOT response, which is page 618 in the packet, and noted ODOT saying, it's our understanding there are other proposed developments in the vicinity that could impact the intersection at Harrison at 32nd and Harrison at 224. They also kind of mentioned that the TIS didn't necessarily state any additional queuing. I was just wondering if you or engineering staff could shed any light on this, if there's any concerns here, or if there aren't any concerns and ODOT is just flagging this as a potential issue.
I think our understanding with engineering, of course, reviewed the TIS as well. I think what ODOT is flagging is the potential for the development at the Murphy site, which has not been proposed. We know it's coming. We've had a couple of pre-app conferences that have not, gone forward. So ODOT is aware of development that could happen on the Murphy site, but we don't know when. There isn't anything proposed. So as it stands with this development, with the Hillside project, the TIS, came out, the way it needed to move forward. I think what will happen is when the Murphy site, whatever happens there, that may be the development that starts to trigger some additional improvements at those intersections. But for this one, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so just for my own understanding, and I think I'm pretty clear, for this proposed development, the TIS isn't suggesting any changes to any of those intersections, but at some point we might get to a place where some of these intersections need to have changes. Okay. Cool.
Correct. Yep. Those offsite improvements did not trigger, no offsite improvements were triggered by this development for those intersections at 32nd and Harrison or 224 and Harrison.
Great. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Other commissioners? Seeing no Zoom hands raised and no physical hands raised. I'm going to move on.
Chair, you're muted.
Oh my goodness. The next question for you, Vera, is whether or not we've received additional correspondence. I believe you noted in your presentation, but I guess within the last few moments.
Not that I can see, no.
Okay, great. So it's that point in time in which we move on to applicant testimony. Would the applicant or their representative like to comment? If so, and as you're being brought into the meeting here, I'd like you to just remember to state your name and your city of residence for the record if you are speaking tonight.
Okay, I've brought over Debbie Cleek and Devin Allen. Debbie, if you can let me know if there's someone else on the team that I should be bringing over to speak or present, please let me know.
Yeah, if you could bring over Ryan Milwaukie to present.
Got it.
Okay. Yep. Great. And Devin's going to start by introducing the project and the team.
Okay.
Hey, good evening. My name is Devin Allen from Portland. I'm the Director of Development with the Clackamas County Housing Authority, and I'm joined here tonight by our project architect, Ryan Milwaukie with Scott Edwards Architecture, and our land use consultant, Debbie Cleek with the Booking Group. So thank you for having us. We're thrilled to be bringing this important proposal back for your consideration. The Hillside Park redevelopment seeks to turn an aging public housing development situated on an underutilized lot into a vibrant mixed-use, mixed-income community that will add up to 400 new homes at a time when quality affordable housing is in such high demand. Since the preliminary plan development was approved in March, the Housing Authority has been focused on refining our development plans and strengthening our communications to ensure that we're reaching all of our residents and community members. The pandemic has presented some challenges in terms of outreach, but we've worked on solutions to meet folks where they're at. We've held 3 resident meetings to discuss our plans and answer questions. We've made resident services and development staff available for one-on-one meetings. We started sending out a monthly newsletter to park residents and circulated hard copies of our planning application and plans. In addition, we met with Ardenwald along with our relocation expert and responded to their questions and concerns. And now I'll turn it over to Ryan to walk you through the changes and revisions to the plan since the preliminary application was approved.
Thank you, Devin. This is Ryan Milwaukie. I'm with Scott Edwards Architecture. Vera, am I able to share my screen to go over the plan or not?
I hope so. Let's see.
Ryan, if you wouldn't mind, if you would just state your.
Sorry, Portland, Oregon.
No problem. Thank you.
If you're not able to, Ryan, hold on. I'm gonna, just a second. I'm gonna promote you to panelist. I think that should help. Okay, brought you over. You should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, thank you. So once again, Ryan Milwaukie with Scott Edwards Architecture. Really briefly, I'd just like to go over with a visual the summary to the changes to the plan. The Southeast 32nd Avenue frontage has been designed with more input from TriMet, particularly on the location of the bus stops and other transit facilities along this frontage. Basically, TriMet wanted to have input as to these existing bus stops that were located at the northern and southern ends of the site. We met with them as well as City Milwaukie Engineering, and it was decided by TriMet, decided by TriMet that they would prefer to consolidate both facilities into one larger facility near the center of the plaza, where it would be well used and is kind of the heart of the project. Particularly, they were interested in also using our raised curb area as a place where the bus could easily kneel. And in addition to that, they requested that a refuge island be placed behind the queuing area for the bus. They don't like those type of access points to be in front of the bus because people cross in front of it and it's unsafe. This also prevents people who are stacked behind the bus from getting impatient and trying to drive around the bus, which also increases pedestrian safety. The other thing is that by doing this, we also will trigger an ADA access curb on the hospital side of it. So that'll be a really efficient connection over to 32nd Avenue. These transit improvements are anticipated to occur as part of phase 2 of the development when the bulk of the frontage along 32nd Avenue is constructed. And one more item I have to show you is the new phasing has been designed to include only 2 phases, which more buildings will be built at once, and it will have an easier, we added building C here into phase 1. It allows a much easier access for utilities and also preserving access to the manor, as well as phase 2 is larger and it's easier. It's only in 2 phases now. And that concludes my portion. Thank you.
Okay. Debbie, is that it for your presentation, or did you anticipate another speaker?
Nope, that was everything. We wanted to keep it short and sweet because you've seen this proposal before. We talked about it a lot in March, and there were very few changes to what was shown in March. So we want to leave as much time for questions and any comments your committee has, council has.
Yeah, definitely, and we appreciate that. So this is an opportunity then, while we have our panelists here, whether or not commissioners have a question for the presenters, and if you do, just raise your hand. Give me a second. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay, again, we all appreciate you being here this evening. I'm going to move on then to public testimony.
I raised my hand, Chair.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. I just didn't see. Go ahead, Commissioner Edge. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to express my gratitude to the applicant for taking TriMet's design recommendations to heart. That was a condition that we had asked for on this commission, and so I just wanted to say that I appreciate that redesign, and thank you for doing that, and thanks for bringing this to us.
Thank you, Commissioner Edge. We're going to move on then to testimony in support of the application. So this is an opportunity. Again, if you're in the audience, please use the Zoom feature for raising your hand. And Vera, I'll just ask you whether or not you're seeing anyone. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak in support of the application? If so, please remember that you are to state your name and city of residence for the record.
Chair Lisfeld, I don't see any hands raised in the attendees list.
Thank you, Vera. Moving on then to testimony for anyone in opposition of the application. Again, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom if you have a request to speak in opposition of the application tonight. Vera, we'll just give him a second.
I see no hands raised, Chair Lisfeld.
Okay, and then finally, we move on to neutral testimony. Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to speak neutral testimony? Please raise your hand.
Again, no. Oh, we do have a hand raised. Stu. So.
Okay, great.
All right, Stu H., I'm going to allow you to talk.
Just a reminder, Stu, state your city of residence, and then I will be asking my co-chair to time any comments to 3 minutes, and he'll be giving you a little bit of a warning here.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So my name is Stuart Heyman. I live at 3635 Southeast King in Milwaukie. I'm late to the game, so these questions are more out of concern for traffic flow, and if I'm asking out of turn or if I shouldn't be even asking at this point, then you can stop me at any time. In all the talks that I've heard and everything that I've read, I've seen nothing about mitigating traffic problems leading from the site to the east side of Milwaukie, specifically up King and Harrison to the shopping center. There's only one grocery store in the area, and that's the Safeway. And my understanding is the King Road on the west side from 42nd to 32nd is supposed to be more or less a pedestrian way, and traffic is supposed to be routed on Harrison. And that hasn't been the case the last few years. So my question is, has any thought been given to cars and traffic leading out of the site? Has the city made any plans to keep traffic flow down, or at least to protect the people who live in the neighborhood? That's all I'm at. That's all I have to say. I don't know if you want to respond to that or.
Yes, thank you, Sue. So this is an opportunity then for our applicant to respond. Debbie, Ryan, or even Devin, if you'd like to respond.
Sure. This is Ryan. So, Stu, thanks for your question. One of the features of this plan, and if you've seen the master plan at all, maybe it would help to share my screen again. You're concerned about traffic running up through the neighborhood on this 29th Avenue spur, I assume?
Sorry, I can't see it.
Oh, that's okay. I'm pretty sure
It's
that's...
hard to go by the hospital. There's that jog that goes
To the east.
up and heads east.
Okay, well, I can tell you that within this project, we have been very sensitive of the fact that neighborhood through the Arden, or traffic through the Ardenwald neighborhood is a prime concern. And one of the things we've done to prevent that is to install 2 removable bollards at the north property line of the project. That allows for 29th to not connect through to that neighborhood to provide a kind of a desirable route around 32nd. But what it does allow is allows emergency vehicles to continue access through there and serve the neighborhood.
If I could, through the chair, Ryan, I think the question that Stu was more asking about was traffic going east from the site towards the gentleman. Stu lives on King Road, which is to the east near Providence Hospital. Sort of runs parallel to Harrison, but going east towards the grocery store that's at King Road and 42nd Avenue. So I think that was more Stu's concern about traffic leaving the site to travel east to go to the grocery store.
Yes, there will be traffic that does do that.
I can speak to it a little bit. And this is Debbie Cleek with the booking group from Portland, Oregon. And I can say that we did include a traffic study with our proposal that looked at all of the traffic movements and intersections in the vicinity of the development. I think we studied something, I think like 12 different intersections, maybe a few less than that, to see where traffic was anticipated to go and if the development on this site would create any problems with those intersections. And I believe what we found was that there was one intersection quite far to the south that is getting pretty close to being at capacity because of, and the development will add, I think it maybe is at capacity already, and the development is not going to help that intersection, but it's not creating so much additional traffic that it warrants repairs to that intersection. But other than that, all the other intersections were fine. So I think what we found was that the traffic, whether it's going east or north, is going to be pretty nominal and shouldn't have a significant impact on anything, including King Road.
Okay, I appreciate that, Debbie. I'm a little bit out of turn here in that there is an opportunity for rebuttal here for any of the comments made, which would be Stu at this point. But first, the commissioners have an opportunity to ask if there's any clarifying questions you'd like to request of Stu. And Commissioner Sherman, I see your hand is raised, so just a quick clarification. Is your question for Stu or for our rebuttal?
The question is for staff relative to Stu's comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I think from what I was hearing, at least, and what Stu was saying, was around the intersection of 42nd and Harrison, which the transportation impact study did indicate just a marginal negative kind of impact on. And I was just curious from a staff perspective, are there any improvements already planned around 42nd and Harrison? I feel like this commission, we've kind of talked about this in the past and just could not remember if engineering is already planning any upgrades at that intersection, in the near or medium term.
I am not familiar with enough. I'm not familiar enough with the engineering department's, their capital program or kind of where those improvements might be slated. I would need to take a look at the TSP and see if there was something on. And I don't have it in front of me, but I can look it up online and get back to you on that. And I do think Chair Losfeld, I think Stu is gone. I think he might have accidentally disconnected himself, I think, from the hearing. I don't see him in our attendees or our panelist lists anymore. Not sure what happened, but.
It seems as though no commissioners have questions before Stu. If you do, now would be your last opportunity to mention anything. So I'll officially move then into rebuttal. So does staff have any additional comments in response to the applicant presentation or to public testimony, and maybe what you've already said there, Vera?
I don't have anything additional to add. I would point out that the TSP is going to be updated in 2022, 2023. So a development like this one in particular, and other new developments would be factored in into the TSP and into the transportation planning. So there may be, if there aren't already improvements slated for 42nd and Harrison, for example, or something like that, the TSP would be covering the universe of impacts from any of these developments. But that's all I have on that.
Okay, thank you, Vera. And so this would have been the opportunity then for the applicant to have any rebuttal or additional comments based on what was noted in public testimony. So it's, again, one last opportunity to the team. If you would like to say anything in response to Stu's comment, now would be your chance. If not, we will close public testimony and move on. I'm seeing nothing from our.
Yeah, we would like to close testimony.
Great. Let's move on then. So we'll close public hearing. Public testimony portion of this hearing on PD-2021-001 Hillside Plan Development is now closed. This is an opportunity then for our commissioners to start discussion. Who would like to take that first step? I see Commissioner Edge. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. This is, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward review that we have in front of us. It's, is it substantially consistent with what we've already approved? If so, we make the recommendation to City Council to approve it. And so I think that what they put in front of us obviously is substantially consistent with what we've already reviewed and approved in great detail earlier this year. The revision to the plan, again, with the bus stop consolidation, I really appreciate, because that wasn't part of the original plan, and it's an improvement to this site. The new location and the new design treatment is going to be much safer. As someone who at the age of 11 nearly got run over in a very similar situation a few blocks north on 32nd Avenue, crossing in front of a TriMet bus, I appreciate that this design is brought to this area. So anyway, I think that it meets all of our criteria that are in front of us today. I agree with findings and conditions of approval that are put forth by staff, and I'd be happy to approve this today.
Thank you, Commissioner Edge. I'll give the opportunity for anybody else to comment. Commissioner Sherman?
Like Commissioner Edge, I think this is substantially similar to what we've already approved, and would also like to thank the applicant team for the consultation with TriMet. Those are some great changes.
I appreciate that. Any other commissioners like to make comment? Okay, then I will take a motion if there is one.
I move that we approve application file PD-2021-001 with the findings and conditions of approval as distributed in the staff report.
Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Oh, Vera?
Vera?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to confirm that the motion is to recommend approval to City Council.
Oh, yes.
I just want, okay, thank you.
So the decision is a recommendation to City Council, Vera, which will make this final decision after a public hearing. Please see planning staff for details concerning the City Council hearing date and our process. So appreciate everybody.
We need to hold the vote, right?
Yeah. Correct.
What did you just say?
We need to hold the vote.
Oh, was there?
We were about to count hands when Vera.
I'm sorry. All those in favor, thank you. Please raise your hands. Seeing all hands raised, and including my own. Thank you. Aye. I'll say, are there any opposed? Wouldn't think so. So it has been moved and seconded, and therefore the decision is for recommendation to the City Council for the final decision after a public hearing. Middle Housing Code is our next item on the agenda. The public hearing on Middle Housing Code is now called to order. The purpose of the hearing is to consider application number ZA2021-002. The purpose of the application is to request approval for the application for code and map amendments for the first phase of the implementation of the city's comprehensive plan. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and the relevant criteria and avoid any repetition and non-relevant information. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to Council regarding whether the proposal conforms with all cities' applicable criteria. I now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or which criteria can be found.
Milwaukie Municipal Code Section 19.902, amendments to maps and ordinances, and Section 19.1008, Type 5 review.
Thank you, Vera. Conflicts of interest. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? Okay, seeing no hands raised. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? No hands raised. Okay, staff report.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. All right, go to slideshow. Again, thank you very much. Vera Coley, Senior Planner, here to present for hearing one of our comprehensive plan implementation project, our code amendments. All right. We've been here before to talk with you about this project. Thank you very much. This project is the first phase of implementation of our comprehensive plan, which was adopted in August of 2020. This project goes from, we started with our visioning process, which led to our comprehensive plan. And now we are at the implementation section, which is where our implementing ordinances and our zoning code. This project is intended to focus on housing, tree preservation, and parking, and intended to implement our comprehensive plan policies related to housing and tree preservation, and related to, of course, parking. It also, as a secondary idea, implements Oregon House Bill 2001, which is a requirement for communities in Oregon to expand housing options throughout our residential zones. We have a number of policy mandates from our comprehensive plan that has informed this entire process. We are increasing the supply of middle housing and provide housing choice throughout the city. Another mandate is to increase the tree canopy and preserve existing trees throughout the city and support the city's goal of 40% tree canopy citywide. And finally, to manage parking to enable middle housing and protect trees as we go through this process. This project, we've been working on this project for a long time, and this is a very kind of compressed graphic that shows the process for this project, which started back in September of last year of 2020 and moved through a map and code audit and analysis, concept development, community review and testing, finally draft code and maps for review by our implementation committee that we had. And then finally, we had our draft code and maps posted back in June throughout this entire process that included public engagement, monthly committee meetings. And here we are now in our public hearings with a goal of a probably winter, early spring adoption of the final code. We've held a number of work sessions with the Planning Commission as part of this process. We did monthly updates starting in October of last year as we moved through the process with the CPIC or with our implementation committee. And then when our draft code was posted in June, we had a series of work sessions with you in August. Feels like we were hanging out all summer together, going through the code, so we could really get into the details with the commission and work through the proposal as we were refining the code to be posted in September for this first public hearing. The Planning Commission code review schedule is as follows, as we would like to propose it tonight. The discussion will focus on middle housing and parking. And we would ask the Planning Commission to take public testimony, to deliberate and discuss the code amendments that we've proposed, and then to continue the hearing tonight to October 26th, where we will continue that discussion. And let me take a step back, that this review schedule that I'm discussing right now is a little bit different than what was in the staff report, and I'm going to explain why in a second. But that the continued hearing on October 26th would continue the discussion around middle housing and parking, address any lingering questions, take any public testimony, and then continue the hearing again to November 9th, where we can still address any lingering questions about housing and parking, but the focus of that hearing would be around the development-related tree code section. Take public testimony, deliberate, and we would ask that a recommendation to council be made on November 9th. The reason why this is a bit different, we've added a public hearing to the schedule to address the tree code. As part of the tree code process, we issued a Measure 56 notice to all residential properties in the city. That notice was mailed on October 6th to meet the noticing requirements for the October 26th hearing, which was supposed to be the tree code hearing. However, there was a snafu made with our printer, and I believe of the over 10,000 mailings that were sent out on October 6th, less than 1% of the addresses that were to receive that notice received an empty envelope. So there was some kind of a mix-up happened with the printer. So some of the addresses did not receive the notice. The city takes public notice very seriously and wants to make sure that we follow all of those requirements. So we've added another hearing to November 9th, and a new round of Measure 56 notices will be mailed out to everyone again for the November 9th hearing. So those mailings will go out on or before October 20th to meet the 20-day notice. So want to make sure that we got that noticing correct and that folks had all the opportunity required to be able to participate in that tree code discussion. So that's why we've added another hearing for November 9th. So the November 9th hearing will be focusing on the development-related tree code. Okay. Following this, this is the tentative schedule with the City Council. Again, the Planning Commission will be making a recommendation to City Council on this package of code amendments. On December 21st, we will have a work session with the City Council to go through the package of code amendments. And then the hearings will begin in January. So with the new November 9th hearing, we've sort of bumped the City Council hearing schedule. So by about 30 days in total. So we would have council hearings on January 18th, February 1st, and then hopefully on February 15th, we would have the third council hearing and a vote to adopt the code. Again, this is our tentative schedule. We'll see how it goes. Okay. This is a brief summary of the public engagement that this project that we held as part of the project process. Again, this isn't part of the code piece, but for the whole project when we were working with our CPIC, a full accounting of all of the activities in both a spreadsheet and a summary report was included with the staff report. But you can see here that we had a robust public engagement process, albeit most of it was virtual. We weren't able to hold any in-person town halls or meetings or anything like that, but we did the best we could under the circumstances and held interviews, had pilot articles, monthly CPIC meetings, virtual open houses and community surveys, handouts, and those open houses and community surveys were all available in English and in Spanish. We did have small group discussions in both English and in Spanish, and we had our monthly updates with both the Planning Commission and the City Council throughout the process so that everyone was kind of brought along and knew where we were in the process. For the public hearing specifically, on September 1st, we posted the proposed code amendment package that you have as part of your staff report. We posted a 35-day public notice. On September 1st, we updated all of our project web pages, city's webpage, Engage Milwaukie. So we had our sort of an open house on Engage Milwaukie as well. We did several email blasts. We posted an executive summary of what the code amendments were and used all of our city social media to direct folks to Engage Milwaukie to get all the details on the public hearings and how to participate. On September 22nd, we sent out a notice, a mailed postcard to all residential and business properties in the city, both in English and in Spanish, to let folks know how to access the code amendments, how to access information about the hearing, and how to participate in the hearing. We made a virtual presentation to the Milwaukie Rotary Club on September 28th. All of the NDAs were sent materials to encourage them to review all the code amendments and participate in the hearing. Materials are available at the farmers market. That date is incorrect. It's actually this Sunday. Sorry, it wasn't this past Sunday. We had pilot newsletter articles. And again, we have our Measure 56 notice mailed regarding the tree code to just about everybody on October 6th and definitely everybody on October 20th. And again, those mailings were to all over 10,000 addresses in all of those mailings. Maybe this might be a good place to stop. Just wanted to check in with the commission. Are there any questions about the public process and the engagement process to date? Any?
Vera, I can't see everybody, so
okay.
Go off mute and address commissioners if you have any comment. Okay.
Okay.
Seeing no hands raised or no one speaking up otherwise, Vera?
Great. Okay. Thanks. Okay. Part of this project, again, is not only to implement our comprehensive plan policies related to housing and tree preservation, but it's also to comply with Oregon House Bill 2001 and its mandates. House Bill 2001, or HB 2001, requires middle housing options to be permitted in all residential areas that also are zoned for detached single unit dwellings. And what we mean by middle housing are townhomes, cottage clusters, ADUs, and plexes. And by plexes, we mean duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. So the House bill has very specific language, very specific math that has requirements of what must be allowed. So the proposed code amendment package complies with House Bill 2001. It's been reviewed by the Department of Land Conservation Development for compliance with House Bill 2001. And we've had our meeting with DLCD staff, and it does comply with House Bill 2001 related to allowing for middle housing options in all of our residential areas. So the first part of the code amendments relates to our zoning map. This is our existing zoning map, and what is circled in red over to the right of the screen are our existing residential zones. We have 8 residential zones in the city. The bulk of the city is zoned R5, R7, and R10, which are our lower density residential zones. But approximately 70% of the city is zoned for residential uses. And all of those zones allow single detached or single family homes. So the code amendments that are being proposed affect all of our residential zones. Again, because middle housing must be permitted in all of the zones that allow for single family or single unit homes. As part of our process, while not required by House Bill 2001, it is something that is encouraged in our comprehensive plan to simplify our zoning map if possible. And so what we are proposing is to consolidate our 8 residential zones into 6, but even more simply put, our proposal is to leave the higher density residential zones as they are and where they are. But from a zoning map perspective, but we are proposing to consolidate our low density zones, our R5, R7, and R10, and consolidate them into one residential zone, which would be the RMD, or our medium density zone. So on the map here on your screens, you can see that the RMD zone would be in yellow. So that is the consolidation of the R5, R7, R10 would all be in one zone. And this addresses our comprehensive plan policy of equitable distribution of housing choice throughout the city. And so these middle housing options would be applied throughout the city, throughout all of our residential zones. But it also makes the zoning map and the zoning code simpler, because we're trying to kind of compress some of our zones, because as we'll see a little bit later in the presentation, middle housing is to be permitted on lots meeting a certain size. So it doesn't matter what zone you're in, it matters what size the lot is. So it made some sense to try to streamline some of our zoning and, well, I guess, in fact, get rid of some of our zones and kind of try to compress those and make those a little bit simpler. And in a future zoning or planning project, we will be addressing our higher density zones and try to clean those up. There are some inconsistencies amongst those zones related to some conditional uses. And so we would like to simplify those as well, but that will come up in a different project. Related to the zoning map is our comprehensive plan land use map, which is map number 8. So because we are consolidating in our zoning map, we are proposing to consolidate in our land use map as well. So our low density and moderate density designations on the land use map would now be consolidated into one, our moderate density, and our medium density and high density land use designations would be consolidated into a high density. So right now we have 4 residential land use designations in our comprehensive plan. We are proposing to consolidate those and have 2. And again, this matches what we're doing with our zoning map as well. Are there any questions about the mapping portion of our code amendments? And I can stop sharing if that's easier. I just want to see. I've inserted pauses into my presentation because otherwise I'll just talk for the next hour. So this way, I want to be able to answer any questions that you might have about the mapping proposal.
Commissioner Hemer, go ahead.
Commissioners, no, you.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess the question is that we had discussed that, hey, R1s could really be put on the arterial streets. And the answer that we got back from staff was, well, that was going to be a little difficult to do this time. But when we start looking at the mixed use commercial zones, we'll dive into that. What is the guarantee? Or I guess I just don't want it to be lost. I want it to be memorialized. Is there a place to be able to do that during this session?
That's a fair question. And so the idea was, again, we were originally trying to consolidate our high density zones as well and really compress and simplify our zoning map. But when we looked at what are the permitted uses in our high density zones, there was a lot of difference between the two as far as what is a conditional use and what is allowed by right. Example is multifamily housing. And so what we proposed and what we talked about with the commission was that we would be sort of attacking our high density zones in a subsequent project, and that we wanted to add that into as part of our neighborhood hubs project so that we could address multifamily housing as part of that. As far as a guarantee goes, I'm working on the scope for that neighborhood hubs project, and addressing our high density zones is in the scope as we're talking about it. My boss is sitting right here, and she's in charge of that. And so if anybody can guarantee this, I think it's probably Laura, but it is our commitment to address that. We wanted to address it during this project. So it's important to us to clean up those high density zones and make things more consistent across those zones. So I think we are committed to making that happen as part of that project, but I'll let Laura speak to that as well.
We are committed to making that happen as part of the Hubs project. Absolutely.
Thank you both. Commissioner Sherman?
Thanks, Chair. I had a very similar question to Commissioner Hemer on this topic, because I do think that, thinking at the parcel level about map changes that we might want to make, while that hasn't been part of the consolidation process, I think thinking about land use, thinking about how the city is changing, thinking about, where frequent transit is and is not, is definitely one of the things that I guess I'm excited to hear. There's this firm commitment to including kind of into the next phase of the work. Has there been any discussion though about how property owners or residents on some of those corridors where we might see changes again could understand the incremental process might mean you get multiple notices of your zoning is changing because we're taking this kind of over time based on the resources and capacity that we have. Do you have any insights you could share on that?
I'm not sure that we've really thought about how we're going to do that. I think an example would be one of our transit corridors is King Road, which a good bulk of that right now would be in our proposed RMD zone. It's not a high density zone, even under the consolidation, right? So it sounds like what you, Commissioner Sherman, Commissioner Hemer are talking about is not just kind of the consolidation of the high density zones, but are there areas that want to be sort of upzoned into a higher density zone because of its location next to transit, that kind of thing. So I think that's something that we would be, talking about as part of our, I guess I'll call it our high density zone project as part of our hubs project. But to your question specifically, Commissioner Hemer, about sort of how are we engaging with the public and so on, that will be a very important component of the project, is that public engagement. And we'll be looking to talking to even our consultants and to our own community engagement team here with the city, if they have ideas about, how do we do that so that we're not sort of stacking notices on people so they don't know which one's the right one, or which one's the most current one. So I think we're going to I think we're going to need to think about that a little bit and sort of understand kind of how do we not drown people in notices and make it strategic, and really I think we're going to have to be really thoughtful about how we do that, because it isn't just kind of consolidating and making uses consistent. It's actually about upzoning properties, and that's a whole nother layer of things to talk about. But you raise a great point. I think engagement on that level, on the sort of the parcel level or sort of the corridor level, is going to be critical to that project for sure. No, you raise a great point. Thank you.
Thank you there. Commissioner Hemer, you have a question?
I just want to reiterate scope of work. I hope that we look at arterial streets and being able to upzone them or high density them, not just combining the R1, R2, R3, but also be able to take those arterial streets and be able to upzone them.
Another thing, just to pile on for a quick second, I was thinking about, because I think it's outside of the scope of the middle housing work we've been doing, but is very relevant to conversations around affordable housing, is also maybe thinking about future zoning changes we might want to consider around manufactured dwelling parks and protections the city might be able to put in place in order to help preserve some of those housing options. I know other cities in the region have seen a number of those parks where tenants don't own the land underneath them, suddenly having the whole park sold off and really having, market rate affordable housing, probably the most affordable housing out there, start to disappear. No, we don't have a large number of manufactured dwelling parks in the city, but I hope that that could make it into the scope as we're thinking about high density housing as well.
No shortage of things to do. Thank you.
Vera, I think that was the end of your presentation and kind of the conclusion with questions there, right?
For that section, yes.
Oh, for that section. Okay.
Oh yeah, there's a lot more, sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep, no, thanks. Okay, let's go back to. All right. So we should be able to. Okay, no, nope. Where's it going? Okay, sorry. It wasn't letting me advance the slides. So let me start again here. Okay. So let's go from here. Okay. All right. All right. Next section of code amendments deals with accessory dwelling units or ADUs. Our key amendments would be to allow ADUs to be permitted by right, subject to design and development standards. We are proposing to include some revisions to the footprint requirement for ADUs that for accessory structures that are more than 3 years old to be converted into an ADU. This is that issue where we've had folks have to come in for a type 3 variance because they have an accessory structure that is 850 square feet, for example. And they want to convert that into an ADU, and now it's and because it can only be 800 square feet. So they've been coming in for type 3 variances. So what we're
Vera, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yes.
Laura, if you wouldn't mind going on mute, I think we're getting some feedback.
Oh, sorry about that. I didn't realize I was on mute.
That's all right. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. And then one of the final kind of the key amendments is that we've included or proposed to include a new type 2 variance for ADUs that are for small increases in size. Right now, any ADU that wants to be bigger by any amount is automatically in a type 3. And so we wanted to include a small increase in size, similar to how we have other type 2 variances for small departures from minimum setback, for example, or maximum lot coverage. So we want to include a new type 2 variance for those types of ADUs so that they could be a little bit bigger than the maximum. And so again, to allow for some more flexibility to create these alternative housing types within our neighborhoods. Now, the proposed development standards within the code amendments, we've seen this chart before as well. Under the existing zoning code, the standards limit the form and type of housing allowed within our existing zones. The proposed amendments update the ordinance to simplify the existing residential zones, permit a broader range of housing types, and remove certain development standards and approval standards for the middle housing types. So what we're proposing is to change our minimum lot sizes to correspond to the requirements from House Bill 2001 for housing type. So what this chart shows is what is permitted currently on lots of certain sizes and what is being proposed. So on a lot size of 1,500 square feet, the only thing that is permitted would be a row house or a townhouse. Similarly, we would be allowing those in our proposed code for the townhomes. What we are proposing is to reduce the minimum lot size for a single detached dwelling. Currently, our code allows for a detached single dwelling to be on a lot of 3,000 to 5,000 square feet if it is already a lot of record. We don't have a lot of those, but occasionally there is a lot of record that is already smaller than the minimum lot size in our code. What we are proposing is that a single detached dwelling, and up to 2 ADUs or a duplex would be permitted on lots of at least 3,000 square feet to just shy of 5,000 square feet. And then you can see in the chart, 5,000 to 7,000 square feet would allow for a detached single dwelling plus up to 2 ADUs, a duplex or a triplex. And then if it's over 7,000 square feet or greater, we are proposing that it would permit single detached dwelling plus up to 2 ADUs, a duplex, triplex, quadplex, or a cottage cluster. Again, the lot size in this code amendment package, the lot size is what governs what can be built. But any of these housing types are still subject to maximum building height, maximum lot coverage, setbacks, all of those things. But again, in order to comply with House Bill 2001, the lot size is what's governing what can be permitted. So these are the proposed, this is a summary of the proposed development standards that we've talked about before, and how this would shake out as compared to what is currently permitted in the code. Okay. And just wanted to comment again that part of these development standards, development standards would apply to these housing types, but we are also proposing that the code would allow for attached or detached units. So a duplex or a triplex could be attached units, as you see here in the example of a duplex, but they could also be detached units. So you could have them as actual separate buildings on a lot. Again, to provide more development flexibility for a site. Having an attached duplex or an attached triplex may not be the right thing for a particular site, and having detached units provides some more design flexibility for a property, and it also can provide some more flexibility when it comes to tree preservation on a site as well. So it gives folks some options on how to design and how to develop the site. As far as design standards go, so currently our code includes design standards for single family dwellings and duplexes. We have design standards that include garages and carports, how those relate to single family and duplexes. And then we have design standards for multifamily housing. So 3 units and up is a multifamily development in our current code. The proposed amendments kind of upends this a bit and creates a universal set of design standards that applies to all middle housing. So the multifamily housing is 5 units and more, and that stays in our multi-unit design standards. But we've created kind of, like I said, a universal set of design standards that applies to all middle housing. So it extends the standards to apply to attached and detached forms of single and middle housing up to 4 units. We have standalone subsections for cottage clusters and townhouses, because those are special, and they have some additional sections of code that need to talk about those design standards. But what we're trying to do is right size and merge the housing standards into a universal set that applies to all of these different middle housing types. And all of that is detailed in the code package that we submitted. So this is my next break for questions on our design and development standards for middle housing or for accessory dwelling units. And maybe I'll stop sharing here so that I can answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Edge?
Thanks, Chair. So I was looking over the code in 19.301.5B.3, where it's the middle housing lot coverage exception, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it says 1 to 4 dwelling units, and I'm just looking for some clarification on the 1 to 4. Are we preconditioning that standard, the number 3 standard on the proposal being for middle housing, and so it doesn't. So the 1 to 4s. I'm just trying to figure out where the 1 fits in with that definition.
Oh, right. Because so the design standards are intended to apply. So they don't apply to multifamily housing. So that's 5 and up. So there's a whole different, kind of section that talks about the multifamily. So the 1 to 4 was intended to apply to, yes, single family, duplex, triplex, quadplex. So it's middle housing and single detached are all subject to that same exception. So that's kind of how we're defining it. That 1 to 4 is a category, and then 5 plus is multifamily. That was the intent.
So the intent is not that we're granting a lot coverage exemption for middle housing specifically, but for middle housing and single unit housing.
Correct, because that exists now actually for single family. So we're applying the same exception to middle housing as well.
Because the provision has middle housing in the name. This is on page 57. Or it starts on 57. Number 3 starts at the very bottom of 57, and so 58 is the actual text of the standard. And so number 3, increased lot coverage for middle housing.
Right.
And then it says,
yep,
you can get an increase of 10 percentage points for 1 to 4 dwelling units. I don't believe that really we wanted to do that for single unit.
Well, we do already. We currently have increased lot coverage like that for single family as well. I know that this is the duplex section, but we already have increased lot coverage for single detached dwellings as well. And maybe what we need to do, and you've brought up a good point, is that we have 2 different sections for increases in lot coverage, one for single family and now one for middle housing. And I think what I need to do is look at them and combine them because they really probably can just be one because it's actually the same. It's still 10 percentage points. So I think it's repetitive. So I think that's probably what we need to take a look at and see if we can combine those 2.
Okay, so that is just specifically about the dimensional standards of the structure, and it's allowed to have that exception.
Yes.
Okay.
The code has allowed for additional lot coverage. The idea being that folks that in single family, well, and in duplexes as well, the idea was that to keep folks in their house, if they need to build an addition, they can do that and kind of stay and go over the lot coverage. But I think what I'll do is I'll take a look at those 2 and 3 and see if there's a way to just kind of create one increased lot coverage section for all of it. And then it can be the same because it is repetitive and it's probably confusing to have it that way. That's a good catch. Thank you.
And then did we have rear lot standards added like we had discussed? I haven't found those in the code yet. I'm kind of digging through the strikeout, the underlying strikeout version.
Yep, the rear lot, the rear lot and flag lot, or the back lot and flag lot section is in 504. So it's 504.8. And I have different page numbers than you do, so I'm in code sections, sorry. Okay. But it's in 504.8, so it's right before the design standards section. That whole section is flag lot and back lot design and development standards.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Sherman?
Commissioner Sherman, you're muted. Sorry.
I thought I was pressing unmute. Guess not. Thanks for the type 2 variances for type B ADUs. Can you help me understand why we wouldn't also just apply that variance to type A ADUs?
Well, type A ADUs, if you're bigger than a type A, then you're just a type B.
Except I guess we have a 200 square foot difference between the two of them. So if you wanted to be, I guess if you wanted to have a 700 square foot ADU, how do you get there?
Oh, sorry. So if you're up to 600 square feet, you're a type A. If you're over 600 square feet, but up to 800 square feet, you're a type B.
Gotcha.
So 700, anything over 600 and up to 800 is a type B. Yep.
And so is the type 2 variance for the type B solely on the exceeding the 800 square feet, or is it also for changes in height structure or base zone requirement for side and rear yard?
So there are already type 2 variances for setbacks and lot coverage. So those mathematical variances are already in there. This one was specific to the square footage, to the footprint of the structure to allow it to be bigger. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions about?
Hands are being raised there. Okay, Vera.
Okay. All right. Great. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, see how this goes this time. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, it keeps putting me right at the beginning for some reason. I don't know why it does that. Okay. So now we're on to townhouses. We talked about this at our August 24th work session. So we've had townhouse code since 2012, and we've not had any built to date. The proposed standards in the code amendment package are a combination of design modeling and recommendations from our consultant, as well as the large city model code that was developed as part of the House Bill 2001. As part of House Bill 2001, the requirements are that the minimum lot size be 1,500 square feet, that the minimum street frontage be 20 feet, and that we allow 4 townhouses in a row. You might recall in our conversation with our project consultant, we had a different standard recommendation that it wouldn't exceed 40 feet. In our discussion with DLCD, we can't do that. We can't limit the width of the townhouse row unless we also limit the width of a single family home, which we don't do. So we needed to kind of shift gears, and that was what in our list of proposed changes from the code package that you reviewed, so that it's actually it's a maximum of 4 townhomes would be permitted. But this picture on the slide, and we talked about this at the work session, but for folks that might not have seen this, this is a triplex that is built. It's near our downtown. It wanted to be townhouses, but it's not because our current townhouse code has some weirdness in kind of what the minimum lot width and the minimum frontage can be, and sort of how the standards are laid out. So this was built as a multifamily development, as a triplex, but this is what a townhouse, a row of 3 townhouses could look like as well on their own lots as ownership units. So it's just an example of how kind of something that we currently allow could also be a home ownership opportunity for folks as well. So the townhouse standards are generally the same, the design standards for a single dwelling, or the proposed 1 to 4 unit standards that we have, those universal design standards. So the proposal in the code is for that in the RMD zone, that we would have a maximum of 4 townhouses in a row. The standards also ensure that we have curb and plant strip area in front. So part of that discussion that we had with Marcy McAnally from UrbsWorks was to make sure that the shared accesses were a minimum of 24 feet apart, so that we make sure that we can kind of maintain some of that on-street parking as well. So so that we have that sufficient curb space on the street in between the shared accesses to the driveways. Okay. Any questions about the townhouse standards? They're what we discussed, but for that allowing 4 townhouses in a row as opposed to that maximum width. Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay. All right. Cottage clusters. We talked about this as well at the August 24th work session. Again, the general characteristics of a cottage cluster: detached and attached homes clustered around a shared open space. Parking is often grouped in a shared lot. The cottages are small in size and in footprint. Sometimes a cottage cluster development can have shared resources or amenity space, and the units themselves or the cottages themselves can be on their own lot, or all of them could be on one single lot. And so you see some pictures here from some existing cottage cluster developments around the region. House Bill 2001 has some very specific requirements for cottage clusters. They must be permitted on lots that are over 7,000 square feet. Their building footprint is limited. The lot coverage and maximum density do not apply to cottage cluster development. Design standards are addressed in the large city model code, so we've pulled some of those into our own code as well. And overall, cottage clusters, and I think this is why cottage cluster are sort of protected within House Bill 2001, are emphasized as a very important housing type, especially for addressing attainability, because they are limited in size. We talked about how to address cottage clusters in our high density zones versus our moderate density zone. So the proposal, and you see here some prototypes sort of as an example development of what in our moderate density zone, what a cottage cluster could look like in between 2 lots with single unit homes, and what one could look like in our higher density zones. And that's actually a built project up in Northeast Portland. The proposal allows for attached units within our high density zones and detached cottages in our moderate density zones. So this chart sort of summarizes some of the key components of the cottage cluster between our RMD zone and then in our high density zones. So our maximum numbers of cottages per cluster. And again, attached cottages are proposed to be permitted within our high density zone. The maximum building footprint for a cottage is 900 square feet. We do have language in there that the average could be 1,400 square feet. So some could be larger, but the maximum building footprint is 900. Maximum building height, 2 stories, 25 feet. Again, most of these, in fact, all of these are right from the large city model code, which is from House Bill 2001 requirements. You see the minimum site vegetation, amount of open space per cottage, and our parking space per cottage. So in our RMD zone, we're proposing 1 parking space per cottage, but only half a parking space in our high density zone. So a bit of a break on the off-street parking when it comes to our high density zones. And finally, the cottage cluster code amendments are intended to promote market rate provision of homes that are affordable or less expensive for households of a variety of incomes and sizes, design that balances the reduction in private outdoor space with an outdoor common area, and promote community building within a housing cluster and within a surrounding neighborhood. Any questions about the cottage cluster code amendments? We have not made any changes to that section from an IC Commissioner Hemer. Hold on.
Commissioner Hemer?
Can you go back to the slide? Well, you don't have to go back to the slide. Just explain, something just does not seem right. Mm-hmm. In your high density zone, why are you only allowing 8? And in your MD, why are you allowing 12? Is it because you're assuming that the 8 buildings are all going to be attached?
They could be attached, but they don't have to all be attached.
Right. So it seems kind of counterintuitive. Why wouldn't you have 8 in the RM and 12 in the high density?
I think the idea was that if you had 8 attached, so that's actually 16 cottages. So taking into account the fact that there could be attached cottages within the high density zone. That's why the overall number was less, because there actually could be more dwellings themselves because of the attached. But it's a good question. But that's why, it's because of the attached. And that was something that that our consultant helped us with. But it is a little counterintuitive, admittedly. So that's certainly something that we can, swap or increase in the high density, because they'd still be subject to, the numbers per cluster and the spacing and all of that as well. So that would make sense as well to do that, to kind of make them even, but allow attached units within the high density zone. If that kind of gets to your question, I think.
Do other commissioners have question or comment? Commissioner Edge? Oh. Go ahead, Commissioner Edge.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a quick question, Vera. I thought I remembered us having a discussion around whether or not we should allow cottage clusters on back lots and flag lots. And we ended up kind of, I think, agreeing that we did want to do that. I think as a commission, that was our recommendation. Am I interpreting this correctly, that the state law kind of preempts that whole discussion and takes that choice away from us? Because we have to allow a cottage on any lot over 7,000 square feet?
Yes, I believe that is true.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. And we've not, and certainly in the code, we've not precluded them from being in, on our back lots or flag lots. It's all about the minimum lot size. But you're right. We sort of called that out as a specific thing. And I think you're right, that if the back lot or the flag lot is large enough, you could have a cottage cluster on it. Yes. Yep.
And I mean, that's what we wanted to recommend anyway.
Yes.
So it's not inconsistent. I was just curious if we were preempted. It sounds like we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Sorry there, Commissioner Sherman.
I actually had a question going back to townhomes. So if anybody else has anything on cottages, we could stay on topic before, and then get me before we.
I don't see any other hands raised. So let's go with it.
Okay. Vera, just really quick, one of the things that we did spend some time talking about was, how we could kind of avoid that wall-like effect. And so clearly we can't limit the length of that wall. I'm curious, do we have anything kind of in code that focuses maybe on step backs or setbacks between units to kind of create some visual articulation?
Sorry, I'm looking at my code right now. That's why it doesn't look like I'm paying attention, but I am. And I'm looking to see. I don't know that we have something specific. Let me look at but we do have, because townhomes are still subject to those universal design standards that do have articulation, main entrance, eyes on the street kinds of requirements. So if you'll forgive me, let me look really quick. So yes, so the articulation section of our design standards gets to that point that you're talking about. So as far as, townhomes are still subject to the same articulation standards that a single family home would be. So a single family home that exceeds 30 to 60 feet in width has to have certain components within it to break up that wall. Townhomes are subject to the same thing. Yes.
Great. Yep. Thank you so much. Yep. Appreciate it.
I'm glad for these questions. It makes me get into this code even more, which is great. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any other hands being raised.
Okay. So we continue?
Yes.
All right. Let's go here. All right. Okay. Got it. Okay. Now we're on to parking. All right. Yeah, we're nearly there, by the way. Okay, so in our parking section, per House Bill 2001, one parking space is what we can require for middle housing. So that is what our code is requiring. We do have some reductions built in to our parking section for quantity, for proximity to transit, and income restricted housing. So those are by right reductions that are identified within the quantity section of the code 19.605. We have also included some changes in our existing sort of where the off-street parking space is. We've changed it so that the parking space can be in the driveway or within the setback. The existing code requires that off-street parking space to be outside of the setback. So effectively, we require 2 parking spaces right now for single-family homes. We are proposing to reduce that to the 1 as the required off-street space. And we do have, we've added some other items within our parking modification process. So we have existing, our current code has a parking modification process where you can apply to provide less parking or more, but predominantly less parking than what is required. And so we've added some language into how you might do that. So if you wanted to ask for a modification to allow for on-street spaces to count for your off-street spaces, you can go you can propose a modification to that. And so there is sort of case by case or site specific decisions that can be made at the type 2 level, which is the planning director level, in cases where that is appropriate for what is being proposed. But again, we did take your direction on trying to can we get some by right reductions, into the language, and we've done that again for income restricted housing and proximity to transit. So we've applied some of our by right reductions to middle housing that currently are not there. So there's only the 1 slide about parking. So are there any questions about what we're proposing for parking? And I should say, sorry, off-street parking. So the minimum required off-street parking.
I'm not seeing any.
I see Commissioner Sherman's hands up.
Commissioner Sherman, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Lostfeld. On parking, kind of maybe a really specific technical question. I think it was looking at page 129 of the PDF that was posted, and it has some of the parking dimensional factors. And one of the things I think I just wanted to kind of ask is, are we changing kind of the stall widths that we have as a requirement? As I was looking through the package, I was just reminded that we often have applicants asking for changes on stall width based on other jurisdictions and what their requirements are, and how it seems like our requirements require more space than what other local jurisdictions are doing there. So I was curious, are we changing any of those stall widths to maybe bring ourselves more in alignment with other places in the regional market?
Yeah, we have not proposed, for example, we don't have compact spaces. We used to. Our code used to have compact spaces. We don't anymore. But one thing that, and I think if I recall the section that you're talking about, it's actually in 700, which is the engineering section. What we've changed, sorry, I'm flipping through my section of the code because the city engineer talked about that as well, in being able to kind of address sort of how the layout of parking areas as related to how the engineering department is reviewing those things. So, and what that has to do with is on-street spaces. So so as far as off-street parking spaces go, we are not proposing changes to the dimensions of the spaces, but those diagrams that you're pointing out, Commissioner Sherman, are specific to street design standards in the engineering section, because what we wanted to be able to do was have the engineering code allow for diagonal parking on street spaces. So it's not just parallel spaces, but now we have standards for that. So the city engineer kind of cribbed some of what we had. Can you please mute yourself? Sorry. Okay, thank you. Sorry, because now I'm hearing myself 3 times. And so what the city engineer did was looked at those standards and pulled them into on-street spaces as well. So we may have situations where on-street spaces are better suited or better designed to be angled spaces. So he has that ability to do that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we are not proposing to change the dimensions for off-street spaces, but we are pulling in some of our dimensional standards so that we can allow diagonal parking on street spaces.
That, I guess maybe it kind of answers my question. Laura, I see that you're raising your hand, so happy to hear your thoughts. I think I was just kind of starting to wonder if on street, off street, if we are dealing with a lot of parking modifications around the width of a stall, maybe we should be thinking about changing our requirement so that we're not having to deal with parking modifications that more than likely we're going to grant anyways. So, you know, why create some of those burdens kind of on applicants? That's maybe the larger question in my mind.
Okay. No, I'm making that point, and we can take a look at that as an option. Thanks.
And if I would just could add to that, Commissioner Sherman, is that a lot of those modifications and a lot of those arguments have been made for smaller parking dimensions, have been made for our multifamily and not necessarily for our residential. So we're not talking about multifamily right now, but it's a good point, and we should continue to put that on our to-do list to think about whether or not we need to be updating those standards, but they're not as applicable to the residential standards at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. That's a really good point. You're spot on. It's mostly in the multifamily that we're dealing with that. I was just thinking about it as I was reading through some of these changes. So thanks for that.
Are there other questions for Vera? Vera, it seems like everybody's
okay. I just have one last section, 2 more slides. It's just about the back lots and the flag lots. Sorry. And then I promise that's it.
No apology. This has been a long time coming, so.
I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. All right. Let's go back to here. All right. All right. It's not going to let me do that. There we go. Sorry. I keep going back and forth, and it's not letting me. There we go. Okay. There we go. Too many things. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right, final section is to talk about flag lots and back lots. We talked about this at one of our work sessions in August as well. Flag lots and back lots are an opportunity for more infill housing and kind of what some people might call hidden density. On the left, you see some existing flag lots in the city. And on the right, and all of these lots have houses on them now. I should have updated that aerial at Cheragino Farms. But you can see the highlighted lots in the back. Those are what we are calling back lots because they're not accessed on the property on sort of a tail of the flag lot. They're accessed via an easement. Our current code doesn't allow back lots, but we are proposing to allow back lots because in many cases, our flag lot design standards wouldn't allow for this sort of rear lot development because a lot of the lots that have this potential are very narrow and can't accommodate the flag lot design standards. So we are proposing that these backlots be permitted. The proposed language incentivizes middle housing. So we are proposing that we would allow for a reduction in the front and rear setbacks on flag lots for middle housing. Currently, the rear and front setbacks on flag lots is 30 feet. We are proposing that be reduced to 20 feet for middle housing types, and that we would allow for the pole portion of a flag lot to count toward the minimum lot size for middle housing. So small incentives, but incentives nonetheless for the flag lot. And then the back lot there isn't a pole, of course, as part of that. But we would allow for those for the rear lots or for those back lots as well for development. So I don't know if there are any questions about that, but we haven't changed really anything from our flag lot and back lot discussion. I will stop sharing. See if there are any questions about that.
Sorry, I almost lost battery power. Anyways, so go ahead, Commissioner Sherman.
Here, it sounded like you said we hadn't really changed much since our last conversation on this. Do we still have the pole width requirement at, correct me if I'm wrong, like something like 35 feet?
For double flag lots, yes. So the minimum pole width standards are still there. What we've changed in the code is that we are allowing for variances to those. Right now, variances are prohibited from any of those things, and so we are allowing for. So we haven't sort of opened the floodgates on all of this stuff, but we have allowed for some departures from that the code currently would not permit. So,
and for a single flag lot, what is the current minimum
25
width
feet.
requirement? 25.
25.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
we have not changed that. No.
Yeah. No. That's. I mean, I feel like the more I've been thinking about it, it seems like we might want to consider kind of reducing it. And so I'm glad to hear that we're thinking about a variance process there. Is that a type 2 or type 3?
It's a type 3 as proposed right now. And so if we want to entertain that as a type 2, generally type 2 variances are mathematical. So we would want to apply, is it a 25% reduction in the width as an example? That's type 2s are intended to be, that it's a defined amount of variance. And then if you want to exceed that, then you go into the type 3. But right now we've proposed it as a type 3.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks for the update there.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Hamer?
Yeah, so I am looking at, Vera, for you, 17.28.060, which on the non-outlined is page 255. When we say more than 2 flag lots or back lots prohibited, doesn't that mean per pole, or does that mean per parent property?
Correct. It's per parent property. Yep.
We might want to. Oh, I see. All right. Then my next question is that didn't we discuss that we're going to allow these in new subdivisions?
I don't know that we did. Did we?
Well, if I remember our August 24th discussion, I think that we had a serious talk about it, and we said, well, if we allow them in new subdivisions, that it could eliminate some of the streetscape and everything else that would go on. And I thought that we're in a little bit of an agreement, but maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I can use that to deliberate. If so, then 17.28.070 should be eliminated, right?
Yeah, so that's, I think, then what I would ask is to get some kind of consensus direction from the Planning Commission on whether or not flag lots and back lots should be permitted in a new subdivision. Currently, flag lots are prohibited in a new subdivision. They're intended to be kind of an infill option, not as part of a new development. That example from Cheragino Farms is a good one. We would not permit something like that under the current code or even in the proposed code. So the question then on this particular issue to the commission to think about, and that I would like some direction from you if this is a change to be made in our recommendation to City Council, is if flag lots and back lots should be permitted in a new subdivision.
Right. Commissioner Hamer, I remember that conversation as well, and I don't believe that we did come to a consensus, but that the suggestion was thrown out there. Personally, my perspective, I would be in support, and I think it makes absolute sense if we're providing it in other areas of the code that we would do it for new subdivisions. But do others have comment or?
So we wait till we have discussion after testimony?
I'm sorry, what?
Should we wait to have the discussion until after we have more testimony?
Well, what we're hoping to do is when these types of suggestions come up to just get a quick read from the group that before we continue. So again, it's just a quick read to see whether there's any appetite for this from the commission. Commissioner Ert?
I guess I'm would like some more clarification on what the intent would be in new development to include that. I understand that it, like, if an existing area, you know, has this need to kind of fill this housing, that makes sense to me. But like, why would a new development intentionally be built in that way? Like, if we're opening ourselves up to that, like, that's my question.
Okay, great. Let's, Commissioner Sherman, any quick comments?
I think quick comment maybe in response to that, Vera, I don't know if you could pull back up the Cheragino Farms, is that really was in that instance infill, right? It was because of the configuration of the site. There was no way to put a road back there. And so it would have been a handful of lots would have ended up with, you know, really large backyards, but instead, you know, this creates that opportunity. And so I think if I were to entertain this, I really would want to make sure it's for that kind of infill purpose, where site configuration isn't really allowing those opportunities. That's kind of my quick take.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Massey.
Well, yeah, my concern were much the same as Commissioner Ertz. So let me just pose the question to Vera and Laura. I mean, we have this restriction in place now. I'm assuming there's a reason for it. And so before we go 180 on that, do you folks have any idea what the reasons were?
I think generally, and I can go back sort of and look at the legislative kind of history of the subdivision piece of it. It seems to follow within kind of what our flag lot standards are. Generally, our code is written to kind of discourage flag lots. And I think the idea behind it being in a new subdivision has to do with, again, development in backyards and sort of what does that do to kind of surrounding areas. I think I'm wondering if it had something to do with connectivity as well. And would it affect potential connectivity between developments? Those are sort of ideas off the top of my head. And I'm happy to go back to kind of 2002, 2009 and take a look at that legislative history and see kind of when that came up. And that's not difficult to do. And I can certainly have a response to that for you for the next hearing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Edge, and then we'll wrap up and continue on.
So I also remember that discussion, and I had some concerns. But I think what where I ultimately felt like I was going was the flexibility should be available, even if it's like a variance or something. I know that's not our preferred design, and that's okay. But you know, obviously, Cheragino Farms was a brand new subdivision that was designed to create back lots. And so, you know, it's, I think that allowing it in some extra review, you know, capacity perhaps, you know, so that we can really signal that we are discouraging it, but then also make it available as a tool just in case it's, you know, needed. That was my thought.
Okay. Commissioner Ernst?
I just want to echo Commissioner Edge's comments. I don't think things are typically a problem until they're actually a problem. And I don't know, but I wouldn't anticipate a lot of developers coming in and intentionally wanting to use this kind of design unless it's just necessary for kind of the existing property. However, having said that, I think it's nice to have some kind of safety net or something in place to where this isn't intentionally being done when it doesn't have to, you know, to save costs on roads or you know, to cut corners in some, you know, if somebody comes in and is developing, you know, an area. So I just echo, I mean, I'm not against it, and I just want to have something kind of in place because, you know.
Sure. So Vera, I think it's safe to say that there's interest, but, you know, reasonable concern to make sure it's done correctly. So what I understand, Vera, is you are recording this conversation as part of what will be the staff report on this. And that's how, just for your sake, commissioners, that's how this conversation will move forward. That we just wanted to kind of, as these things happen during the presentation, keep track of them. So that really is the first suggested amendment that we would be making. So Vera, I think you were right there at the end.
I am. The last slide, I'm not even going to bring it up, is just to, this sort of concluded the summary of all of the code amendments. I just wanted to remind folks of the hearing schedule, so that that our request is for the commission to continue this hearing to the 26th after discussion and testimony, of course, where we can revisit questions from tonight's hearing, and that on November 9th would be the hearing for any other kind of leftover discussion on middle housing and parking, and that we would be talking about the tree code on November 9th.
Okay, thank you, Vera.
Thank you.
So now, Commissioner Edge.
I just wanted to check, as a matter of process, are we going to have the opportunity to ask staff some final clarifying questions before we go into the public testimony tonight?
That's exactly the next bullet point on my list.
Perfect. Then my hand is raised for that.
You're on top of it. We've been asking clarifying questions, but now as your final and formal commissioners, if you have any clarifying questions for staff, please raise your hand. Commissioner Edge.
Thanks, Chair. So Vera, thanks for that presentation. I just had a few questions about context. And so the first one really is that the House Bill 2001 language, as it was adopted, includes a provision about density expectations. And it really prescribes quite heavily that municipalities aren't allowed to assume that our density will increase in areas where middle housing is allowed by any more than 3%. And so do you have any background on the 3% figure, first of all, and kind of why that was put into the legislation? And then I have more kind of follow-up questions for that. So I guess maybe we'll just ask that question first. Do you know why 3% is the number?
I do not, but I can find out because I know who to ask. So I don't know why that is the number. But I can have that answer for you for the next hearing or sooner.
Okay, and then and since we're talking about single unit dwellings, and so when we look back over, let's just say back to 2009, what are the total number of single unit dwellings that have been permitted for construction in the city?
Since 2009, it is 133.
So 3% of that would be just shy of 4 units. And so we can expect over an 11-year period that we would have seen 4 additional units as a result of middle housing being allowed based on what the state's legislated projection is. Is that correct?
I think that's one way of looking at it. Yes, certainly. Yeah.
And so, and then to take this another direction, if we were to have, and this is just going to be easy math, because when was the last time we saw a 100-lot subdivision in the city?
Never.
But if there were a 100-lot subdivision, that means that the 3% increase would mean that we would expect to see 103 total dwellings in that subdivision, which is the equivalent of precisely 1 lot building 1 quadplex and the rest being detached single unit homes. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
And so then to interpolate from that, we would say that in order to get 1 duplex, it would be a 33 lot subdivision.
Right.
And so when was the last time we saw a 33 lot subdivision? Wow.
Yeah.
Decades. We just don't get that kind of.
No.
Yeah, we don't get that kind of development.
No.
Basically so I guess the idea is that the legislation more or less is implemented by the model code, right? And so the goals, the policies, everything of the legislation is implemented by the model code. How much do we go further than the model code requires or prescribes for us to go that might give us some reason to infer that we might see more than 3% increase in density for single unit dwelling permits?
Yeah, I think the key difference that our code has over the model code is that we are allowing the detached units as part of our middle housing. So as far as numbers and that sort of thing, that's not what we've done, for minimum lot size and so on. We're sort of right in line with that in the model code. But from a design standard standpoint, I guess I would call it, the model code doesn't specifically allow for the detached units as part of a duplex, triplex, quadplex, and our code is doing that. To the extent that that translates into more density, I don't know that it does, but it certainly provides for more site design flexibility. So perhaps that encourages some more of the middle housing. But I guess the trade-off or the benefit of that is more site design flexibility, so that you do have more opportunities for tree preservation, location of parking, that sort of thing, when you can create the detached units, which is why we were proposing it in the first place, that would be sort of the offset of that. I don't know that directly, like I said, I don't know how to calculate that as a direct mathematical result in additional density, but that, I guess, potentially could provide more opportunity on a lot if you could split up the units than if they had to be attached.
So we go a little further than the model code, but not like strikingly so.
No.
In any respect. What is the capacity for new lots in our buildable land inventory? In the residential, the low medium residential zone.
Yep. Let me look at that really quick. So the capacity within our H&A shows a need for 1,170 new housing units by 2040. And our estimated capacity is 30 new need by 2040. The capacity is almost 3,500 units.
Does that include multifamily or multi-unit?
That it does, yes. So for single family detached, it's 765. Sorry.
And we have that capacity?
Yes, we have more than enough capacity. Yep. In fact, we would have, based on what our need is and what our capacity is of total housing, not just single unit housing, we would have a remaining capacity of over 2,000 additional units, and that's under our existing zoning code. So we have a surplus of capacity for our projected housing need for the next 40 years. Or until 2040.
Yeah, so in terms of lots that would be available for redevelopment into these kinds of lots that would house or that would allow for single or 1 to 4 unit dwellings or cottage clusters, you said it was around 760.
Yep, that's the new need. Yep.
And so just do some quick math here.
Oh, I'm sorry. The capacity is 7. So the projected new future need is 572 single detached units.
And the capacity is that 760?
765. Mm-hmm. Yep.
765.
Yep.
So that's about 23 additional units of middle housing in that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ert?
Thank you. I love this conversation. Does the city have any goals for owner occupied percentage of residents here in Milwaukie? So right now, I think we're at 58%, correct me if I'm wrong, on owner occupied units. And I, don't know if we're trying to entice. I know we're working on the code, but townhouses are just a more affordable way for people to have owner occupied units. And right now we're below the national average on owner occupied. And there's not any, I just want to clarify this because I know I can hear the community coming back at me. There is a certain percentage of that helps communities when there are owner occupied units. And so increasing the affordability or the accessibility for people to own their homes and their property is a priority. So I'm wondering if the city has specific goals. I think we're at 58%. I think the national average is like 62%. But in communities that tend to be very strong and have thriving small businesses are usually at 70, 80, and 90% owner occupied rates. Those are the communities that tend to have a robust small businesses. Obviously, income is a factor in that, but it's also owner occupied. So does the city have a goal to bump up that 58%?
I think what I can speak to, and I can let Laura chime in here as well, what I can speak to is what the housing needs assessment talks about as far as kind of what of the forecasted need for housing, which isn't the same as a goal of homeownership units. So I just wanted to make that distinction. But in the HNA, we talk about the homeownership rate in Milwaukie is expected to rise modestly over the 20-year period that we're talking about in the HNA. And of the new units needed, roughly 74% are projected to be ownership units. So the goal, or certainly related to the need for housing and kind of where we're thinking the projected need is going to be, the majority of those new housing units are projected to be ownership units. I know I'm not exactly answering your question, but I want to get to it in that from what we're talking about in the forecast for needed housing and for needed housing, small n, needed housing, it looks like that, 3/4 of that forecasted needed housing would be home ownership units. We don't talk about what kind of home, single family townhouse, whatever, but they are projected to be ownership units, if that helps.
Vera, I have a question, and it actually came from one of our community members, and I think they're in attendance this evening, but I did want to ask you whether or not the standards were intended to apply to quadplexes the same as for cottage clusters of 4 units.
Cottage clusters, some of the design standards apply to cottage clusters, but cottage clusters also have additional standards that are very specific to cottage clusters based on open space units and so on. But if you're talking about the design standards specifically for the structure itself, as opposed to the site, which is what I think it sounds like from your question. Let me just go really quick to that section. Because a number of the design standards do apply to cottage clusters as well. For example, the articulations, and these again are design standards that apply to units that are facing the street. All of our design standards apply to, it's about the street facing facade. So the articulation standard, eyes on the street, so the minimum percentage of glazing, where the main entrance is, the detailed design. So there's a list of detailed design standards that you need to have. All of those do apply to cottages within a cottage cluster. Yes.
Okay, Vera, then what about the site requirements?
Site requirements for the cottage cluster are pretty specific as far as how many cottages are part of a cluster, how far they can be from the open space. So there are site design standards that are very specific to a cottage cluster related to common open space, the pedestrian circulation, where the off-street parking is. So there are site aspects to a cottage cluster that are specific.
Okay,
yep.
And that's intentional.
Correct.
Cottage
yep.
clusters. It's just a different animal than a quadplex.
It is, yes.
Okay. I want to move on unless there are other questions specifically from Commission. And let's see. Okay, now this is the opportunity for testimony. We've received, have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items that were included in the packet, Vera?
Yes, there was a letter submitted from Stefan Lashbrook that was submitted a couple of days ago that wasn't included as part of the packet. And then there was also a comment letter about the tree code specifically that was submitted. I've sent those to you and I will include that again because it is so specific to the tree code. I'll include that as part of the November 9th staff report as well, because it was very focused on that too. But those are the only two. Everything else has been captured in the spreadsheet of comments that was made part of your packet.
Commissioner Sherman, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did actually, on as maybe a matter of process. Are we taking comment just on middle housing and parking and not on tree code tonight? Just wanted to be clear on that. Yeah, okay, thanks.
I would think so, Vera. And so those comments reflected from the community would be relevant then at a future hearing.
Correct. Yeah, and because at that hearing, we'll also have staff, Natalie and Peter, who are, really well versed in the tree code that would be able to answer questions, would be here for that. I'm certainly able to take questions, but I don't know that I'll have answers on the tree code.
So do those comments need to get resubmitted during that hearing, or is it like this just all, okay.
I'll just bring them over. Yeah.
Okay, so if that's that, then we move on to testimony in support of the application. So I know that we've got a number of community members on. So do we have anyone who wishes to speak in support of the application? If so, please use the feature to raise your hand.
Okay, Micah Mescal has his hand raised.
Okay, while we bring him into the fold here, Micah, I just want to ask you to state your name and your city of residence for the record before you begin, and then we'll move forward. Micah, can you hear us? We are not hearing you on our side yet, Micah, if you're speaking.
I am speaking now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Micah Mescal. I live in the city of Milwaukie, and I was part of the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee, and I'm here to testify in support of that plan. I really appreciated that process. My fellow committee members and city staff and the consultants. I think we had a lot of great conversations. I'm really appreciative that the process, though it centered middle housing, it also included parking and tree protections, because I think they're intrinsically connected. And I'm really glad that that was part of the process. So in addition to those three things, I additionally put in another layer through this process of the climate emergency that our city is in, our state is in, and our world is in at the moment. And so as we were looking to increase middle housing options and infill density, I really wanted and focused on how could we loosen car-centric development requirements, i.e. parking, and how can we ensure that the housing that we do create, the infill and the adjacent implications, how can we make sure that is as resilient as possible into the future? And so prioritizing protecting trees was very key to that. And I'll be back the next hearing to talk more in depth about the tree code specifically. But yeah, to kind of crib off of Joseph's point about given the likely pace and spread of the middle housing developments that come from this, I believe we should not worry at all about the parking burdens that these projects will have on neighborhoods throughout the city. And thus, I think managing parking to enable middle housing and protect more trees should be the highest priority. I think one step that the plan can go further is to consider implementing off-street parking maximums for projects. I think we should reduce on-street and off-street parking requirements further, especially for tribe and quadplexes and cottage clusters. And this can be a tool to incentivize housing density. I think we should reduce parking minimums to 1 per site for all off-street parking. And then further consider eliminating parking requirements for affordable units, again, to incentivize those sort of infill projects, because we know that's what we need, are those middle and affordable housing options. And then just to finish, those parking changes would be a change in policy. I agree with that, but the development that follows the passage of CPIC will likely be piecemeal and dispersed. And we shouldn't be worrying about the parking burden. We need to loosen the car-centric development requirements as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the detail there, and I'm glad that you're still with us after being involved in the initial process. I see that there is one hand raised. Also, Neil.
Mm-hmm. Neil Schulman. I'm going to bring Neil over. Okay. Neil, you should be able to speak when you're ready.
And Neil, just as a note, your name and city of residence, and then my co-chair will be counting you down when you have 1 minute left and 30 seconds left in a 3-minute total.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I'm seeing people nod. My name is Neil Schulman. I'm the executive director of the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. We're located on Lake Road. And I really could probably, I'll sum this up fairly quickly by saying I agree with what Micah said. And there's a couple of other dimensions to that. Obviously, our comments are very heavy on the tree code component. You'll hear from us more in November. But as has been mentioned, I think it's really to the Commission's credit that these 3 topics are being addressed simultaneously and that they need to be thought of as a unit. Obviously, the more space that is freed up from excessive parking requirements is more space where trees can be integrated in designs. It can reduce the burden on our stormwater system that we know will come with increased flashiness that comes from larger storm events with climate change and all the things that we can incorporate green infrastructure by reducing the amount of space that we need for cars and parking to do that. So I think that I wanted to just re-articulate that those are important that they be integrated. And as we incorporate density, green infrastructure, and tree protections, we obviously need to make sure that we make the parking policy fit with that to free up the space for those green infrastructure components. As has been said in the past many times, we can either have room for trees and people, or we can have room for parked cars. And I think I know what the future folks who live in Milwaukee in a climate-driven future will want. Thanks for this process, and we will obviously be talking in more detail about tree code as we go forward.
Thank you, Neil. Vera, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised. So
no, I don't either.
If you're in the audience and you'd like to speak in support, just to use the raise your hand function and we'll bring you on in. So before Neil and Michael, before you take off, there is an opportunity here for commissioners to ask any clarifying questions. And so I'll ask commissioners just to use the raise the hand function if you are seeking clarification from Neil or Micah. Okay, I'm seeing nothing. So I appreciate both of you for attending and staying late. Thank you for your testimony here. And yes, we hope to see you in future hearings on related topics. So I'm going to move into testimony in opposition. So again, use the raise a hand feature if you are in the audience this evening and you'd like the opportunity to testify in opposition. I'm seeing Micah's hand still raised, but I believe that's likely just, there we go. Thanks, Micah. So Vera, I'm seeing no hands raised, so I'm going to move on then to our neutral testimony. Audience members, if you'd like to testify in a neutral position, please use the raise your hand function now to do so. Okay. I see that Stefan is on, but I guess he's not planning to be a part of the testimony piece. So then there's, rebuttal. Vera, I think, well, do you have any comments? Would you like to rebut?
Oh, I don't think I have any rebuttal comments to make. I think I appreciate the and we've heard and Micah and Neil are not the first to talk about reducing our minimum off-street parking even further than we already have. I think if that's something that the commission would like us to to take on even more, or to sort of chip away at our off-street parking, we can certainly take that comment or take that recommendation to City Council. I think to completely eliminate it for everyone might be something that we would that we'd want to think about from a public process standpoint, and sort of, is there any other vetting that might need to happen? We have heard quite a bit on sort of on the other side of that coin as well. But I think the idea of being able to sort of whittle away the requirements under certain circumstances, for example, for affordable projects or for income restricted projects, I think if there's those kinds of recommendations, I think that we can certainly take those up and take them to City Council.
Okay, fair enough. Commissioner Ernst, we're going to move into discussion. So, thank you. So commissioners, now this is the opportunity for us to discuss the code amendments prevented or not prevented, but provided by staff. So I'll open it up first. Commissioner Ernst, did you have something to say just in response to the full presentation this evening?
Kind of just leading into the discussion, I think. First, I just really wanted to thank city staff, because you guys do such an amazing job that I feel like, it lessens my load too. But also I want to thank the other commissioners here, because you guys ask such insightful questions that also I'm just kind of not, it's interesting. So I appreciate the discussion on all of this. I do echo the same future kind of development on, we will require probably less cars and there will be more ride sharing options. So I think whatever we can do as a city to incentivize, even with low income or apartments and being built for potentially those apartments to have their own rideshare car among residents, or incentivize them to kind of have that kind of availability built into into their structure, that can kind of be an incentive. But I do echo that we're just going in that direction. And so as a city, the more that we can attract eventually autonomous vehicles and more rideshare options in addition to the public transportation, I think it's great. But I just wanted to say I really appreciate everybody's work on everything. So thank you.
Thank you. Do others want to add on to that? We have had I'm curious to see what Commissioner Hamer has to say, because we've had this discussion about parking being balanced with infrastructural upgrade requirements, and making sure that we are kind of planning and phasing those things to happen in parallel rather than kind of in a reactive state. So Commissioner Hamer, do you want to?
Yeah, and I guess that I think in the next 50 years, I think that maybe we're looking at a 50-year to 100-year outlook instead of a 10 to 30-year outlook. And my biggest concern about allowing less parking onto sites is that all major car manufacturers are going electric. And so so they have to get plugged in somewhere. That infrastructure will come, but it is time. So you just can't go to the gas station and you can't just plug in for 5 minutes like you fill up your gas can. So it takes time, which means that people will generally do it at their residence when they are not using the vehicle. Now, it may be at their business, but more than likely it'll be at their residence because that's probably the most easiest, cheapest, and most convenient thing to do. And so we need to think about the connection with that. And my biggest fear is that all sidewalks will be covered with cords because people have to run their cord out from a power outlet from somewhere. So I attended 1, 2, 3, 4 NDAs that had on their schedule that they were going to talk about this. Most of them said that they were going to have a presentation, but those got canceled. So I was just there to listen. And I think that there's a lot of talk about the lower income being able to reduce the parking. I think that was a common theme. But the other common theme was worried of infrastructure. And what we see today on our roads, especially in the 1950 developed areas, is no curb, no sidewalk, and really no yards to park your car. And so there's I don't want to call it fear, but there is a non-imaginary code to it, or a non-imaginary seeing. It's not like you're going to be parking on Division Street that has a curb and a sidewalk. You're going to be parking in the grass, in the dirt ruts where the mailman pulls up to put the mail. And so there is a huge amount of pressure that you put onto these systems when you eliminate some parking. And so I think it's kind of a catch-22 when you look at it. I do fear the cords just being spread out all over the place. I think that every residential, at least single unit, a townhome, a quadplex, a triplex, a duplex, and a single-family residence should at least have one parking spot for it. One of the biggest reasons is that no matter where you live in this town, it is a food desert and a school desert. And so I could walk to Safeway, but I certainly can't go to Costco. And I'm sure we all go to Costco at least once in our lives. You need a vehicle. We can't go to the mountains without a vehicle. We can't go to the river without the vehicle. Can't do those other things without a vehicle that we love to do. And so that's why vehicle ownership, at least one vehicle, is still there. So for most people, I'm fat and I'm lazy, Joseph. You probably maybe ride your bike more than I do. So.
Okay, I'm going to move on then to Commissioner Edge and remind you to keep your comments concise so that we can get as much circular conversation going. So I'm going to start the 3-minute timer.
You don't get to do that.
Yeah.
No, I know. I'll get you out of here by 10 o'clock. Don't worry. I do have a question for staff, if I can interject that really quick. When when is our next opportunity to revisit with DLCD the housing needs and exactly what kind of production we're seeing from these code amendments?
So I can answer that. We are actually starting, we're going to update our housing needs analysis / housing needs capacity starting next year. We just received a grant from DLCD to do that work. So we're going to spend 2022 doing that. Then following that, we're also required by the state now to create what's called a housing production strategy. So looking at what we're lacking, what we need, and then how we can actually accomplish reaching our goals that are identified through the housing needs analysis. So that should be done by the end of 2023. So I think it's a really great time. It's really right because right on the heels of House Bill 2001, right, we're going to see our development capacity change a little bit because of what we're allowing now. So I think it's a great opportunity to kind of reassess where we are now and what it will look like in the future and how we can better get to where we want to be by having some strategies in place.
But it might even be a little early, right? Because these code amendments won't take effect until we were saying February or March of 2022. And then we're starting the process towards the end of the year.
We're starting the housing needs analysis. It'll probably be right around the time that the code gets adopted. We have to work through the kind of hiring consultants and all that. So we will be doing that right on the heels of getting this adopted.
So we may not know what, we're going to have a really good, we won't have a very broad sample, I guess, of, a range of time to see, what impacts it might be. It's going to be kind of early in the adoption process. And
it'll be early in the adoption process, but I do think that our capacity will change a little bit based on our new zoning, right? Because instead of just allowing single units in a 10,000 square foot lot, we'll be allowing duplexes. So it'll be really interesting to see how our capacity changes, which basically it'll probably say, it's going to tell us that our capacity is even greater than it was before. And so then it's kind of like, how are we getting the market? The next phase of that is the housing production strategy. How are we getting the market to deliver what it is that we're looking to infill, right?
Right. Yeah. So okay. I mean, that makes sense. I'm just, worried about the, they say, we can only model 3%, of a capacity increase in these areas. And so unless we have data to prove, and so when we walk into that housing production strategies or the, next stage housing needs analysis process, if we don't have the data to prove more than 3%, we can only assume 3%. And so that's where I hope the timing is good enough that we're able to actually get some usable data to help influence that, because I don't know if 3% is the right number. I'm hoping Vera can find something out about what went into that, but certainly I guess kind of moving on to more of my discussion. I guess thanks for your answer on that, Laura. I appreciate what Micah's comment was, ultimately that when we're really looking at, the net of what we would have seen built over, looking at the building permits, over the last, with that 3% increase, I mean, it's not a lot. And so I don't know why. It feels to me like we're having these really heavy debates about, all these cords that are going to be laying across sidewalks and all these parking, cars parked in people's yards and, and all this extra traffic and all these extra people. And it's like our entire city has a capacity. I mean, I know the capacity is, but the projection based on this data that shows, kind of what we would expect the market absorption rate to be. And we're looking at a grand total of almost 23 units in the entire city, or 23 additional units from the capacity for new lots. And so I just don't think that based on that, I don't know why we wouldn't allow a quadplex on any lot where we allow a single unit lot. And I'm going to come back to that because I think that we need to create as many opportunities as we can to make an impact here. And I'm not seeing an impact. I'm not seeing the impact that we're looking for. I'm not seeing the impact that our policies in the comp plan call for in terms of housing Milwaukeeans that need affordable places. I'm not seeing the production to actually make a dent in things based on what we're looking at here. Basically adopting the model code and going with that, and this 3% market absorption rate thing, and I don't see us making a big difference with what we're doing, and so I don't know why we wouldn't reach further and do whatever we can to actually try to solve this problem. That's where I'm stuck. We're trying to solve a problem with this code, not just say we're checking off boxes so that we can, meet HB 2001 and do what the state tells us we have to do. We're trying to solve problems. Let's try to solve problems.
Commissioner Sturman?
Thanks, Chair Losfeld. This is a slight digress, but I also want to stay focused on the conversation Commissioner Edge is teeing up there. But back on the topic of parking, I think in looking at some of the proposed code changes, one of the things that I definitely noticed was around cottage clusters and the minimum requirement of half a space in a high density zone and one in the new RMD zone. I think in many ways, I kind of question why not just take it to half a space in all of the zones. And maybe even going a step further and looking at table 19.605.1, which is our minimum to maximum off-street parking requirements for all middle housing options. Why don't we just go to half a stall, half a space? I think in many ways that could create more incentive for these opportunities. And as Commissioner Edge was pointing out, based off the math, the sky's not falling. We're not going to see, the floodgates open and seeing a ton of development that's going to create these pressures. And as we know from kind of the empirical research that we have before us, we have ample supply of on-street parking. And should things get problematic at some point, maybe 20 years from now, we have other tools like parking permits and other sorts of things that could be addressing that. So I just wanted to kind of propose that we think about changing those minimums for middle housing and reducing them even further.
Thank you, Commissioner Sherman. Commissioner Ernst?
My box moved. I couldn't unmute myself. So if I hear Commissioner Edge, what you're saying is we can do all of this code work, but we really have to make sure that we're enticing developers to come in and build here to fulfill that housing need. Is that kind of what you're leaning towards, is like, how do we just attract developers to come in and do these projects? So I'm kind of echoing, I think what you're saying is we need just more, but I mean, that's a complex problem right now, all over the place. And then also I think mindfully going into that, because I kind of keep honing in on this, but the owner occupied percentage and rate, I think we do have to watch that. So if we're building a lot of apartment complexes, that's great. It does fulfill a need, but there is just data and statistics on how well communities are able to support small businesses in their area by what percentage of owner occupied rates are in that community. So just kind of keeping an eye on that as far as what development we're attracting and how we're getting those new units put in. And, that's why I'm really advocating for townhouses and for affordable, for that people can afford to buy properties. And I know that this is kind of a little bit off topic, but there was some, legacy laws that Portland was doing as far as being able to buy in the community if you can show that you have a history here. And since we're just such a gentrified area, that's just something that is on my radar as far as those laws, because it's kind of groundbreaking laws, the legacy laws of if you can show that you have lived in a community and then housing costs have gone up, that can there be some assistance from city, state, county nationally for developers to come in and build specific housing for people who have lived here for a long time and are being priced out because of housing costs, because of gentrification in our community. And then just echoing also with the parking, I do agree that potentially we can go to that 0.5. And it's also a real cautious thing because parking is still a challenge. And if we go too fast and hard in one direction, we're going to feel the blowback from the community. And it is a prediction game as far as looking at the numbers, how many, youth, 16, 20 something year olds are getting their license. And from my kind of anecdotal experience working in high schools and stuff, the younger generation just is not rushing out to get driver's license. A lot of them that's not their priority. They can't afford a car. They don't want a car. They watch TV and see car crashes all the time. They have ADHD. So there's just so many reasons why I anecdotally, but also probably if we can dig up real data on this, see that kids, and I say kids, but 20 something year olds aren't going and getting their driver's license. And oftentimes, when they do, they're interested in a ride sharing to pay into the apartment complex that has a shared car or shared vehicle that residents can, do a monthly subscription to, or newer autonomous vehicles that are being developed, because especially for women or just a safety issue of you're getting into somebody's car. So there's a lot of programs that are, there's a lot being built and a lot of progression that's happening that I think will eventually balance out. But I do agree that we have to take some caution going in. And I hear you with the charging thing. I think, it's something to keep an eye on. But also, I think that eventually and sooner rather than later, we will have charging stations and those kind of ride shares and autonomous parking structures that they'll just go and charge in between picking up people. So that, that's where we're going. But I love this conversation.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Vera, just so I'm clear, what we're trying to do here is kind of circle around some consensus building around a few topics here. So as we're moving this conversation forward, I'm trying to get consensus on some continued themes here, which being parking and this discussion of going to 0.5 across the board. So I'm going to try and stay on that topic for one moment. And so if commissioners who have your hands raised, if you have a topic specific on that parking piece, keep your hand raised. If not, just drop it. Let's get everybody to kind of weigh in on that piece in particular so that Vera can get something concrete from this discussion. Go ahead, Commissioner Edge.
Totally 100% comfortable reducing the parking minimums as suggested. I have no qualifiers to that whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. That was short, sweet. I appreciate it. Commissioner Massey, we haven't heard much from you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have concerns about drastically reducing the parking. Just a short anecdote. 4 trips in the last week. I took TriMet to 2 of them. Made sense. 2 of them, I took my own vehicle. Made sense. I just think that these things are going to continue. I don't think in the sort of outlook that we have for these codes, we're at the point where we can kind of make those sort of large changes without significant impact. Thank you.
Commissioner Hamer?
I just want an explanation on a owner-occupied home. How do you have a 0.5 parking space?
To be clear, I'd say my proposal is focused exclusively on middle housing and not on single dwelling units.
Quadplexes, duplexes, triplexes are single occupied owned properties.
But they also don't have to be.
They don't,
yeah.
but they would be rented.
I guess
they're single houses. So I'm just asking.
So I think it would,
how would the proposal be that they develop that we now create a parking area inside or around the structure?
So I'd very much be interested in hearing staff's perspective or others' perspective. I think, you know, a quadplex where we assume it's all owner occupied, I imagine 2 of those spaces would be sold as part of buying that property. The other 2 units, you would not have a dedicated spot and you would have to park on the street or maybe not have a car. And so I think that is how kind of functionally that would work. So I'm not proposing it on the single dwelling, though I think, which is the vast majority of our stock and will probably continue to be the vast majority of our production. But just thinking about how we can further incentivize middle housing, I think if we were to dial it back a little bit, again, developers still might want to build more. We wouldn't necessarily be requiring more. The market could then figure out how it wants to provide or not provide. So
Commissioner Sherman, would it be fair to say then that to request that staff look into this and maybe even provide some metrics as to what the real impact would be of a suggestion if it were to move forward? I think we're all kind of speaking hypothetically about certain situations as they might develop in the future. And it would be great to have some further information to spur on this conversation, because I do think we're not going to necessarily reach a consensus on this, but the more so the consensus is we're interested and we want to continue to talk about it. I think that's fair to say, even for those who may oppose it outright. So then is there another theme here that I want to kind of gravitate towards? Commissioner Edge, if you want to speak specifically to one of them, and then we'll try and, again, see what others are sensing.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, I do want to revisit this, and I would like to get like a straw poll or some direction from the commission. I know Commissioner Hemer and I have often been on the same page with this. But you know, I don't really know what the rest of you think, and so I think that that would be helpful for us to hear and for Vera to hear, and that is that we, I mean, I'll speak for myself, and I'll let Commissioner Hemer speak for himself. But you know, we've said this before, and that is, you know, the ranges, the lot size ranges that and what are allowed on them, I would prefer to see that we allow any of the missing middle types, except for cottage clusters, which I know have to be on a larger lot. But any of the 2 through 4, you know, missing middle types to be allowed on any lot where we allow a single unit dwelling. And so that would be any lot 3,000 square feet plus. And that may be unrealistic in a lot of cases for a quadplex on a 3,000 square foot lot, but really, you know, again, let the market decide what it's willing to bear in a given location is really the attitude there. Just give the opportunity to actually create these dwelling units that we need at these price points where we need them is really the goal here. And by having these arbitrary minimum lot sizes to qualify for a triplex or a quadplex just seems very arbitrary and against the spirit of the policy that we're trying to implement, or the suite of policies that we're trying to implement with this code. And again, looking at these raw numbers here, and I know it's back of the napkin math, but you know, if we're really seeing 3% here, then it's going to take us 10 years to get a freaking quadplex built. You know what I mean? You know, we're not going to have a big problem here, and so I think that we need to do what we can to open up opportunities wherever they may be. I think that, you know, we need to do what we can here, and that these arbitrary limits just undermine that effort. And so that's my pitch. So, I would love to know where everyone else stands on that.
Agreed. So let's talk about that single issue specifically. So Greg, go ahead.
Ditto.
Oh, wow. Is that a flop or a flip? Commissioner Sherman?
I'll follow the trend and say ditto.
Very good. Anybody else want to add on? I'm going to add my ditto to that. which I think is a quorum or at least a majority. Commissioner Massey, do you have any input, or Commissioner Arndt, do you want to? Neutral? Yeah.
Sure. I guess my, I like simplicity. But again, I ask myself the question is that, why was this model developed? The only thing, I'm thinking out loud when I say that this model and this hierarchy was developed is that designed, and I'll ask this of, I guess, of Vera, is this hierarchy of spaces per, footprint, is that designed to have these developments blend into existing neighborhoods? That's what comes to my mind when I see that. And so when I think about, putting a larger development into a 3,000 square foot plot, and that sounds pretty dense to me. Staff got any insight here?
I think so. I guess I'll answer that in a couple of ways. One of the arbitrary lot sizes are, modeled after House Bill 2001. So those kind of where those lot sizes came. We brought the 3,000 square foot lot down, for the single unit duplex, single unit plus up to 2 ADUs. So because it was the single unit, lot size. I think I would have to, and I'm going to be talking to DLCD anyway, so I can sort of get a better sense of where these minimum lot sizes came from, the 5,000, the 7,000 idea. I want to understand from them if it had something to do with the sort of a balance between something getting built, and what would the unit sizes end up being on a lot, trying to figure out how does a quadplex with, on a 3,000 square foot lot, how does that work? My question back to the commission will be if we're exploring this 3,000 square foot, minimum lot size, are we still applying the same development standards like maximum lot coverage, like minimum setbacks? And if that's the case, then I'm seeing some nods. So, okay, so that's going to be really easy to model and understand how likely it is for these things to happen. But I think, that makes the units smaller, which makes them less expensive, is my guess. But I think, the lot sizes were intended to, complement an existing neighborhood, but also push the envelope on an existing neighborhood. I mean, right now we allow one house plus an ADU on a 5,000 square foot lot. We're proposing up to 3 houses on a 5,000 square foot lot. So it is more, than what we allow now. But I appreciate the sentiment that, is it enough? Is it not enough? And wanting to push the envelope. I'd like to talk to DLCD and just kind of get a sense of, where did these lot sizes come from? Maybe there's an easy answer to that, just so that.
Yeah, I understand they've been referred to as arbitrary, and that may be true, and it may not be true. Right, it may be based on some more significant analysis. Yeah. That's all. That's all. My only point.
Yeah.
I know this answer.
Oh, great.
Is based on the percentage of lots in the city. You're trying to get 80% of lots to allow a triplex, and you know what I mean? It's like that's right. They're trying to hit targets for percentages of lots.
That would allow
so it is completely things. Arbitrary. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. It is completely arbitrary. It's all about the percentage of lots available to put one of these structures on there.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
I'll stand by that.
Great. So I think, Vera, you're hearing another theme here that seems to carry some weight, at least with this.
Yep.
I'm not necessarily indicating consensus, but indicating that it's a strong consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, was there other kind of topics? Trying to go back to diatribes here from earlier. Take out the outlines. I just need the cliff.
Did we decide on the back lot in new development? Did we come to a conclusion on that one?
Well, that would be like at least the second or third time that we've talked about it and not concluded then. So I think what we indicated was there was strong interest in it, Vera.
Yes.
But again, no, we're not drawing consensus here. Is that enough for you, Commissioner Humor?
Yeah, I heard there was interest to allow it. Or do we explore a type 3 variance to allow it? So really, I think the discussion point is it allowed by right within a subdivision, or is it a variance? So how much do we want them? I guess is the question. And if I could jump back super quick on the 3,000 square foot lot business. So a duplex would already be permitted on a 3,000 square foot lot under the current proposal. Just want that to be clear. And a single family home and up to 2 ADUs. So that's already in the existing code. So what we're asking, or what the commission is asking, is to explore a triplex or a quadplex on a 3,000 square foot lot. Do I have that right? Just want to make sure. Not a cottage cluster because it has its own.
The whole thing. Yeah, because what we're talking about is adding quadplex to the 5,000 to 6,999, and then we're adding triplex and quadplex to the 3,000 to 4,999.
Got it. Okay. I just want to make sure I had that right. Thank you.
Is there anything we haven't covered here that we want to have recorded as part of this conversation? Because
I guess I would ask one more question of staff, and I probably should have asked this earlier, but I think it's still kind of relevant to what we're talking about. Is there any kind of affordable housing, capital A affordable housing bonus or program that would benefit the middle housing developments? Do you have any housing, any bonus, any density bonus, anything related to protected affordable housing as part of these developments?
The only outright incentive for income restricted housing in the proposal right now is the by right reduction for off-street parking, which we're already looking at separately. So there isn't a density bonus or anything like that for income restricted housing in the current proposal. So no.
So we would probably expect to see close to zero capital A affordable units from missing middle housing developments based on our projected capacity at 3%, right?
I think that depends. I mean, we have some, some potential folks that are interested in doing, income restricted cottage clusters, for example, but there's going to be, there has to be but there have to be funding sources for that. It's the market, it's a subsidy kind of situation to do that. But I think what I'm hearing are, should we be having a conversation of what else can we be doing for income restricted developments besides, and this parking thing may be happening to everybody anyway. So is there even more of a parking reduction for income restricted housing, or what other incentives should we be looking at?
Vera, I would like to
I'd really like
that suggestion as well, that we find other methods of which to incentivize affordable housing, because it's just not occurring at the rate that we need to be actually seeing it within the city. So I don't know if others feel similarly. There's so much that we would, ask staff to then look into that. So Commissioner Hemer?
I want to make sure, because when we hear capital A affordable housing, that means income restricted housing, right? And don't forget that we as Metro voters, passed a law to pay in a certain amount of money into a program that was meant to build this low income housing, and it can happen anywhere. So I mean, there are back channel programs that just doesn't mean that that it's not going to happen. It can happen anywhere, right? And so if Milwaukie is a desirable place to have these areas, it's a public-private generally connection that kind of puts them together. So it's not impossible. I just wanted to say it's not impossible. There is a program that's working in place to make kind of some of this stuff happen, I guess.
Right, and I guess my counter would be that it's not happening at the rate of which it needs to in order to match the need. Or it's so significantly far behind that we're not solving the problem. But do others want to add anything to that? Otherwise, okay, Commissioner
Um, I think just reaching out to I'm sure that the city has relationships with local companies that already build a capital A affordable housing in our area. I mean, I know specifically some in our area, and I'm very closely connected to some companies that build. So, I mean, if we're just reaching out and saying, come, please, what can we do? Maybe opening the dialogue to the companies that there's, at least 3 that I can think of just off the top of my head, that's what they do. They build affordable housing. So, I mean, reaching out to them and saying, what can we do to entice you here? And maybe approaching it from that direction to see, to get more construction here. If that's possible.
Yep. Vera, I think that's a pretty healthy list of things to consider and to record into record.
Agreed. This is great.
I don't want to cut anybody if they had other comments. Commissioner Hammer?
I just want to say thank you to all of the commissioners here and the planning staff and all the work that everybody's put into this thing. With every large project, there's going to be a few pet peeves and maybe some opportunities missed. But I think all in all, really, even the way that the package is written, with some really good tweaks to it, I think would make it more excellent. But it shows some really good hard work, some really good thought. And so I just wanted to thank everybody for all their hard work.
Agreed. Okay, Vera, then I'm going to move on to the next piece in our, Next.
My computer dies.
Here. What was that, Laura?
My computer may very well die, so I'm trying to tell Vera, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute, that if it dies, that she has to do the forecast. Sorry about that. So now you know.
Oh, we
I might die.
This.
Okay.
We might have to skip commercials tonight, Greg.
Oh, no, we have to go past.
We need a motion.
10.
We need a motion to continue the hearing.
I know, I'm actually doing that right now.
Okay.
Being on task. Chair will entertain a motion to continue the public hearing on October 26, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I move that we continue the hearing on ZA-2021-002 Middle Housing Code amendments to a date certain of October 26, 2021.
Has been moved. Will it be seconded?
I second
the motion.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. All in favor, aye.
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 And all hands raised. It has been passed. Thank you very much. Other business. Do commissioners or staff have any other business or updates? Really? I feel like I should make something up.
Well, here, I'll say something. Laura Weigel must be wearing her Halloween outfit because she looks like a Jedi Skywalker or something. That one of those, with her mask and her coat all cuddled up there.
I think you said I look like Hannibal Lecter before, Commissioner Hamer, so thanks for the upgrade. I appreciate it.
Greg's compliments are always a little bit sideways. You're never quite sure which way to take it. Do commissioners have any other items for discussion? No. Forecast for future meetings.
Okay, so October 21st, we've got our joint meeting with the NDA. So that's on a Thursday night, 6:30. I think everybody has the information. So I'll hope to see you all on that Thursday. Then we've got the continued hearing on the 26th for the middle housing, as Vera just discussed. We also have a variance for a property line adjustment on the 26th. And then on November 9th, we have a variance for an ADU conversion. And then again, we have the continued hearing regarding trees on the 9th.
Great. All right then, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
It's been moved. Will it be seconded?
I'll second.
Second.
Oh, there you go.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
9:44 a minute. Perfect. Everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Vera, we don't have a link for the 21st yet. Is that correct? The Zoom link?
For the